Finally, the boys are back in town. Thankfully, none of us live in the same town as a Georgia football player that drives, because I don't know if any of us would make it to the next episode of this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the favorite NFL podcast for you all. At least we like to hope and pretend that it is for some people. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. The podcast that has missed you all so very much. It's been a while since the three of us have been on a show once again, and we got a good one scheduled for the beautiful people in this one. First, on the top of the screen with me, he's wearing a Jets shirt. He is, well, for a year, for a season, he was our only Jets fan on the show. Now he has been rejoined by a compatriot, the true, unwavering Jets fan himself, the GamesMaster of this program, Justin. Justin, how we doing?
I'm doing good, man. How you guys doing? It's been a long time.
Yeah, it really has. You still look eternal life after all the concerts you've been to. It's good to see. Good to see that you take care of yourself.
I'm dead inside.
Company. He's dead company inside.
Then company inside. Aren't we all? Aren't we all? And of course, at the bottom of the screen, the man himself, the beautiful Under Armour attire, the reigning champion himself. That's probably going to be on there for a majority of the season. The Podfather, Rick. Rick, how we doing?
You know, I say the reigning now, but Justin, you're going to have a little bit of an edge here because I actually just deleted all of my my picks and my standings this morning because I'm really not confident in them at all. So I'm going to be doing them during the show as we're going along, basically. So you may have an advantage here going into the season, at least over me. It might be a year where the Gopher and I are battling for last place, like the Deer and I battled for last place a couple years ago. So. Because, you know, like I always say, it's all about the chase. So 1 year at the top, and I'm already bored with this. So, you know, I might just tank the season and try and get something. I don't know what.
First round pick next year.
$400 pineapple or a first round pick, something like that. Yeah. By the way, Dirk, did you say program spelled with a U at the end?
Yes, I think I did.
Jesus, your time in Europe has really corrupted you of the language. You know.
Oh man, hey dude, I was talking about it with a friend of mine the weekend after the 4th of July. I'm almost tempted to open up a Rosetta Stone or something like that and start learning a different language. I think I might need to consider retiring in Europe, 40 years from now, because it's a lot better.
there is a lot, and then you were just in one country. If you were to go all the way through Europe, you'd find a lot of interesting spots. I've never personally been, but I also would like to go to the off the beaten path countries because that's just who I am. So when you say Spain, I say Liechtenstein, and when Justin says Italy, I say Luxembourg.
Yeah, because
I prefer to be not where the people are, to misquote Ariel from The Little Mermaid.
And when we say Germany, you say.
Oh, good Lord. When you say Germany, I say Iceland.
There we go.
Yeah.
I mean, Iceland is a pretty freaking cool spot to go to.
Iceland's phenomenal, man. I think that's we have enough rewards points to potentially get to like a nice little 4-day vacation to Iceland, which I'd be fine with that. So I guess that's too touristy. So if you say Germany, I say the Faroe Islands then.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. So future destination planning aside, guys, we are back. You could see by the episode title, it is officially time for one of our favorite times of the year. It is the 2024 Sports Agents of Chaos NFL Divisional Breakdowns. Those begin this weekend because we have missed you all and because it's been a while since the three of us have been together. We are going to give you not one, but two divisions to break down in this episode. We're going to start with the NFC. We have decided to go full NFC, full AFC this time, and we have based the order upon the division being fully eliminated from this past year's postseason. These were the first two divisions that were completely swept aside by everything. The NFC East and the NFC South. We're going to be breaking those down later in the show. Of course, we end off the program with the rant podium, per usual. But to begin this program, the fun and the games, my man, Justin, is back. Justin, what do you have in store for us?
That's me. So, you know what? I decided while we were doing this, I'm going to do like a little bit of a combination of the two games. It's going to be trivia, but it's also going to be name that player.
Ooh.
So it's going to be a little bit of both. You're going to have to name both the team and the player. So this quarterback is the franchise leader in yards for this team? It's your first hint.
Yeah, that only narrows it down to
32.
32.
I mean,
To be fair, that's the best first hint you ever had. I've never narrowed it down that much.
That's fair enough, actually.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty up there, I'd say. Okay.
All right, Rick, who's the Browns' all-time passing leader?
Eric Kramer or Brian Sipe or Otto Graham or somebody.
I was gonna say, is it Otto Graham?
I don't know. Okay. Well, I mean, obviously, we could just throw out names galore and see what happens here.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll go Drew Brees.
That's a good guess. I believe he is the leading yards leader for the New Orleans Saints, but that is not the direction we're going in today.
Well, I mean, I'm going to give you a decent answer.
No, that's a good one. That's a good guess.
I'm not going to throw Stoney Case or Spurgeon Wynn at you. Like, come on now.
What about Sonny Jurgensen?
I know why you're throwing that name out.
I don't know if he's actually the Washington all-time passing leader. I don't think he is.
Might be Thiesman.
Probably. Let's go with some NFL royalty on this next one. Let's go with Eli Manning.
No, it is not Eli Manning.
Okay.
All right. Now, although this franchise has never had a passer over 20,000 yards in their career, this quarterback currently has 22 plus thousand yards in their career. They also have 141 touchdowns and 99 interceptions.
Wait. See, the interceptions part is a little bit tricky. So he's the all-time leader for this team, but he didn't hit 20K yards in his time there. But he's over 20K yards in his career, and he has 99 career interceptions. That's a riddle. Ain't that a riddle? Oh, wait. So it's a guy that was at a team for a relatively short period of time. And he clearly did enough to be the all-time leader. 99 interceptions, depending on how long the guy was there, that either feels like a lot or feels like only a small amount of time.
Yeah.
Rick is dangerously quiet. I have a feeling he knows who it is.
I think, honestly, me and Rick have the same answer because Justin, this is a slight mistake by you because we did NFL QB passing yards and teams as one of the 2 evergreen episodes for the 3-week break we had. And I'm almost like, Rick, I'll let you say because I think we have the same exact name in mind.
Jameis Winston.
Yes.
Jameis Winston.
For
the
the Tampa
Buccaneers
Bay
are the
Buccaneers.
only team in NFL and for the franchise that does not have a 20,000-yard passer. Their all-time leading passer is, in fact, Jameis Winston, who, let's face it, had a pretty up-and-down career there, but was pretty good, I guess, comparatively to the other quarterbacks that had been there for the most part.
Well, the Bucs could never settle on who their quarterback actually was. I mean, Brad Johnson won him a Super Bowl, and the next year was Chris Sims or whatever,
Yeah.
You never settle on that. So.
And also, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong. I think this still might be true. I remember hearing about this both with when Josh Freeman's contract negotiations came up all those many years ago, and also when Jameis came up. I don't think the Bucs have ever given a long-term contract to a quarterback that they drafted. I think they've never given a second significant contract to a drafted QB.
You might be right about that.
I mean, who have they drafted?
What? No, but that's the funny thing when you think about it. It's like they've drafted like a couple guys relatively high up. Like Freeman was what? Was he a first rounder or a second rounder?
He was a first rounder. He was a late first rounder. Yeah.
So you think about they've had multiple first round picks of QBs, and they've given it a contract to neither of them. Which I'm not saying was the wrong decision for either guy, mind you. But it's kind of crazy that they've never done it to this point. But maybe 2028 will be the year if they draft someone this next draft if things fall apart. You never know.
I mean, what did Baker finish with this past year? He threw for 4,000 yards. So if Baker's there for another 4 or 5 years, maybe he gets it. Yeah, maybe he gets it.
But will he be able to keep it up? We will talk about that later on in the episode, of course.
By the way, Florida State, was that not the second part of your 2-for-1 game special, or was
no?
that?
I think it was the NFL portion.
It was the NFL team.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, so because it's why after you said Jameis, I immediately said Tampa Bay
Buccaneers. I initially thought about a name that would have been off the beaten path there. I initially, before I said Drew Brees, I was thinking, who's the Texans' leading passer? And then I thought it was Matt Schaub. I thought that would have been, because that would have been an interesting one to throw in. Everyone loves some Matt Schaub trivia on a Saturday in July. True.
Although I think Schaub was there too long enough. He definitely eclipsed over 2K yards. Because didn't he flirt with a 5,000-yard season at least once or twice?
I mean, he probably did. But
Andre Johnson was put up yards there with him too.
Yeah, and he had a young DeAndre Hopkins, so I'm pretty sure Schaub was the QB there for at least Hopkins' rookie season. 2009,
Jurg, when he was 9-7, 4,770 passing yards.
That's right there, man.
29 touchdowns, 15 picks. The next year, 4,370 on the passing yards.
Look at that.
By the way, good mention of the Browns' all-time leading passer.
Which one was it?
You tell me, Chant.
Was it Otto Graham?
I mean,
nope. He did name him though, and I was impressed.
Brian Sipe, probably.
Yeah.
It's wild.
See, it was funny. In my head, I was like, wait, did I say Brian Drew? Because that's the character that was in the movie about the Browns on draft day. And I was like, he's not real. So, but yeah.
Brian was it him?
Okay. Phenomenal.
Love it.
All right. Well, that's the 2-for-1 game special combination of the trivia and a name that player. Phenomenal, Justin. Do we have anything else today, or shall we be moving on?
No, we'll leave it for the next time.
I like it. We gotta slow the people back in. We gotta ease them back into.
I don't want to make people OD on some fun. You know what I mean?
I understand it. All right. Shall we get to the main event of the show, or do we have anything else? Do we have a mind-blowing fact? Right?
Yeah.
If we don't, we don't. That's perfectly fine. I have no idea.
Well, just a quick little note here about something that I think you'll all be interested in, because we're going to cover this division and we're going to cover this team for probably about maybe 15 seconds at best. This is an interesting little factoid here for you that I think you'll find quite funny. So the much maligned Carolina Panthers, they're just a wonderful team, aren't they? They're a wonderful team. They have in their history, gentlemen, never done something that other teams are pretty easy bets to do when you're good. The Carolina Panthers have never had consecutive winning seasons in the entire history of the franchise.
Really?
And this is despite, by the way,
you know what? Yeah,
a 3-year stretch where they made the playoffs 3 years in a row. Because in 2013 they were 12-4, and in 2015, the year they went to the Super Bowl, they were 15-1.
But the middle season,
7-8-1. So, not that they're going to anytime soon. Let's be real here, but since 1995 when they started, they have never had consecutive winning seasons in the NFL. It hurts. It hurts even more for the Carolina fan. I say fan because there's probably one singular fan for Carolina now. But yeah, that hurts.
Damn.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So 1996, their second year. They were 12-4, and they went to the NFC title game. That was under Dom Capers. The year before and the year after, 7-9. Then 2003, when they went to the Super Bowl against the Patriots, they were 11-5. This is the other fun part that I'm learning as we're going along. The year before and the year after, 7-9. So 2 years where they had good success. The years preceding it, they were 2 games under 500. Then, of course, 2005, they were 11-5. The year before and the year after, 7-9 and 8-8. They got one better But yeah, you keep going on the list. They have never had consecutive winning seasons. And they won't for another 15, 20 years with how David Jung Tepper is running this team. So,
Oh, that's just rough stuff right there for Carolina. That is extremely rough.
It's sad. But it's accurate, but it's sad.
Poor Carolina.
Yep.
But also, you kind of brought it upon yourself. Anyways, not the fans, just more the team itself. Anyways, well, we've had our fun. Let's get to the football because everyone knows the tagline. If you're new here, it's fun, football, and chaos. We're still going to have some fun in this section, but it's time for the football. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the 2024 Sports Agents of Chaos Divisional Breakdowns. And we begin, of course, like I said, with the NFC East. And if you're once again new to the show and you haven't been here for the past couple of years, the way that we like to break down the division based off of previewing it for this next season is we go in the order that the teams finished in last year from the bottom up. So we talk about fourth place first, going up to first place. And then typically we only do one division episode. This is the first time we're ever doing a 2-for-1. So we could I'll ask now, boys, do you want to give our prediction for this division at the end of each one or prediction for both at the end of the NFC East? NFC South, excuse me.
Keep it consistent. Go one after each one.
After each one?
Way, yeah.
All right. So the people now know. Let us begin the divisional breakdowns. And it begins, like I said, with the division that was eliminated first in the postseason. Both of these teams were out in the wild card round. The NFC East. It was a 2-team race for the postseason last year. Both teams that made it out in the wild card round in different ways of embarrassment. We'll talk about those two later. But first, let's talk about the bottom of that division last year. And we begin with the Washington Commanders. So the Washington Commanders, I think we talked about it last year. I think this was kind of our thoughts about this team going into last season when we did the preview for the NFC East a year ago, which was last year was kind of like a purge year to an extent. It was because think about it, I don't mean purge as in all illegal activities are now proper to be done. I mean, it was the first season under new ownership, but it takes time for things to really come into effect. It was the general manager of the old regime, who I think is still there actually. It is the head coach of the old regime, who we know has been replaced. The coordinating staff of the regime replaced. The quarterback replaced. Everything, and I'm not saying that necessarily like these people were bad. I don't think anyone would call Ron Rivera a bad guy in any way, shape, or form. Amazing coach. Probably you would think maybe gets one more opportunity in his career at some point, maybe in another year or two when people are eventually fired for underperforming. But, he's a fine guy. Wasn't there, team just wasn't performing anymore. Sam Howell put up numbers, kind of just showed he could put up stats, but the it factor isn't really there. And Eric Bieniemy was also the OC last year, not retained as the OC. So from coaching to players to ownership, it was just a purge last year for this organization. And they come into this offseason with money to spend. They spent a little bit, probably more than just a little bit, but nothing supremely long-term. And we talked about that when we reviewed free agency over a handful of weeks. The Commanders, to my knowledge and memory, there wasn't they didn't give out a definitive 4 or 5 year contract with 50, 60, 70 plus $1 million dollars guaranteed to a new free agent. It's kind of more subtle and smaller moves that they made. Getting Austin Eckler for the running back room to support Brian Robinson Jr. Getting a veteran linebacker in Bobby Wagner to head up this linebacking core, right? And of course, all of this, Jeremy Chin in the secondary. All of this is to the new tools and figuring out of things that Quinn is going to have to do, because that's their new head coach, Dan Quinn. And Cliff Kingsbury is the offensive coordinator, if memory serves, new one, which, yay for Rick and I that he's back in the league.
Yay.
And the fresh new toy that they have, the second overall pick, Jaden Daniels. Highly touted rookie, supremely gifted, we believe. Random elbow picture aside during the offseason. The kid was phenomenal. He won the Heisman last year with Joe Burrow-esque stats. Right? That's really the only QB I could compare to him in the last decade in terms of just the pure stat line he put out. So this is a team, boys, with a top 2 pick quarterback veterans around him offensively. I mentioned Eckler, but you still have some of that receiving core with Jahan Dotson. I mean, Jahan Dotson, comparatively to the rest of this room, is relatively a veteran at this point, funny enough. A Terry McLaurin. You have a Zach Ertz as the veteran tight end there, a decent offensive line. I stress decent. I don't think they're that great. And a defense that is kind of some guys who have been mainstays there for the past few years, a handful of young players that they drafted, and guys that they've picked up on free agency. This is kind of a team that's a mix of a bunch of different things. And this is, and we kind of talked about this when we reviewed both the Quinn hiring and then a little bit when we talked about them with free agency. This is just them trying to build something up for the future. And I think that's how I'm going to view this 2024 for them. Justin, I'm going to throw it to you first. Your thoughts about this Commanders team going into 2024?
Like their team, I'm not really sure what to think. Like you said, they have a lot of veteran talent there. They have a lot of young talent there. There doesn't really seem to be a ton of talent in between. You know what I mean? Like guys in their prime, quote unquote, who have had experience in the league and are like ready to, take that next step. It's going to be interesting the way the new coaching staff really comes out and helps this team grow. Because there's so many different directions where they could realistically go. I mean, you want to tell me they're an aging veteran team that breaks down halfway through the season and they started off a little bit stronger and their rookies couldn't step up? Yeah, I believe it. You want to tell me that this is a young, unexperienced team and the rookies and the young guys mostly started and they had some nice highlights and they just couldn't put it together. Maybe they're taking a step next year because of how good and young they are. Yeah, I believe it. You want to tell me that they take the step forward this year? They're a combination of young players who have really they drafted well, and all of a sudden they can take a step and they maybe get close to threatening to a winning record or even maybe a wild card spot, especially with the help of veteran presence. Yeah, I believe it. You want to tell me that this team is nothing? They are terrible all the way through. The coaching staff didn't know how to put them together. I believe it could go in so many different directions here. And there are so many variables and wild cards and rookie quarterback and so many things that could change and are just so unpredictable that this is going to be the hardest team in my mind to predict today. That being said, if we just go based on what we know about them and what we think about the coaching staff and their strength of schedule, I personally think it's probably going to be that youth movement kind of thing. I think you see a lot of veteran players there, but by the end of the year, I think that you can see a lot of young players starting, and maybe they start off a little bit rough in the beginning. Their veteran players end up kind of taking a step back towards the middle of the season, and they start seeing what they got in some rookies and some younger first contract players. And I do think that there maybe is something there. I love Brian Robinson. I think Austin Eckler is a very interesting addition, especially with the style of play of Jaden Daniels. Their receiving core has been strong for a minute now. And I mean, they lost Curtis Samuel, but they still have two really, really good receivers in Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin. I like Luke McCaffrey there. They re-signed Jamison Crowder. They have some depth. I mean, if you remember, De'Ami Brown also had some big plays last year. I think that there's something there to build upon. They're going to have to fix that secondary. And I know they tried when they signed Jeremy Chin and they drafted some kids, and there's talent there, but we're going to see maybe it was coaching last year because they had some rough secondary issues.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe you see some more wins in the second half of the season than you do in the first. But overall, I think Washington stays Washington for now.
Yeah.
I don't expect them to take a Houston-like jump this year.
Probably not. It would take a lot for that to happen.
Well, the main thing that they're going to need is the quarterback play. But I just think that as much as I like Jaden Daniels and his athleticism and his style of play, and I think it fits what they're going to do with Cliff Kingsbury very well. It's so rare to see that kind of jump. And he's, like I said, he's going to be good. Maybe he can be Stroud-esque eventually.
Yeah.
But the first year is a tough one.
And for the full year, like it could be a case where maybe he rips off the last 5 games of the season, just plays phenomenal.
Exactly, and I also don't think that they have had the pieces in place that the Texans did last year.
Especially like
the line's like not the same. They're again strong receivers, but it's just it's missing something.
Yeah,
their run game in my mind is stronger than their passing game.
Right. Rick, just for the context before you go, the NFC East is facing, in terms of full divisions this year, just as a whole, they are facing the NFC South and they are facing the AFC North. Because I know one thing we all point out, but especially like whenever you break it down, is like, who are they facing? Because that plays a key role into how you're projecting not just this team, but also the other teams in the division and their other divisions going forward. So for the context for everyone, the NFC East is facing the NFC South and the AFC North this season.
Right. And for further context there too, another thing I like looking at is also when the buys come for each team. And for a young team like Washington, they have a very late buy. Their buy is week 14 this year. So that's tougher for a younger quarterback and a new coaching staff to work with this younger quarterback in order to have him kind of be the star that they want him to be. I'm going to make a comp for Jaden Daniels, and initially it's going to sound harsh, and I don't mean to demean the player I'm comping him to because of how his career unfolded and unfortunately ended.
Mm-hmm.
But Jaden Daniels' last season in college kind of mirrors Dwayne Haskins' last season in college, if you think about it. Now, Jaden Daniels, in his last year at LSU, 40 touchdowns, 4 picks, 3,800 yards, whereas Dwayne Haskins, out of the blue for Ohio State in his last year, had 50 touchdowns and 8 picks, and almost 5,000 yards for the Buckeyes. They both went to Washington. The difference is that Haskins, to me, it was a tough, rough go for him. No question about it. And I cannot say that I don't see the similar vibe for Jaden Daniels here. I can't say that I see a similar amount of growing pains for them, because it's not just when their bye is, it's not only going into their bye what they have, but coming out of their bye what they have, because they end after the bye at New Orleans, then hosting 3 teams that potentially could be playoff chasers in Philadelphia and Atlanta, and then going to Dallas in the last game of the season. Look, the Commanders are a very young team, but they're a very good young team. However, this is also an interesting team that's full of reclamation projects, if you will. Because who are 2 of the guys they added that defensive line with Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne? Cleveland Ferrell, who was the number 4 overall pick in 2019, I think.
Yep.
And Dante Fowler, who was the number 3 overall pick in 2017. Both of those guys have really underperformed when it comes to NFL play. Ferrell last year for the Niners only had 28 total tackles. That's not what you expect from a number 4 defensive lineman. And Fowler didn't start a game for the Cowboys, but played all 17, only had 13 tackles. So he didn't have a good, season either. So these are guys that are just bodies in a way. Because again, I mean, they lost Chase Young, right? They lost Montez Sweat to the Bears. So
traded them is the way to say.
But they're not on the team anymore. Is what I mean. They drafted Johnny Newton from Illinois, but he's a D tackle. He's an interior guy. He's not a guy who's going to be on the edge. So
they're pretty set there, by the way, between Payne and Allen.
Right, but that's what I'm saying is that odds are that if they don't have a good season, they might move one of those guys. I think Allen signed a 4-year extension back in 21, so he's coming up to like the 3rd or 4th season of it. So,
right,
and he's a guy who's a Washington fan through and through, so like he wants to be there, but push comes to shove, he might see his way out mid-season at the deadline, or Payne might, honestly. What Justin said, yeah, I mean, they tried to end the secondary. They drafted Mike Sainristil still. They added a few other pieces, but Emmanuel Forbes clocks in at 6 foot 180. That is a guy who, unless he bulks up, is probably going to get thrown around by some of the more physical receivers in this league. And honestly, even in practice, he'll probably get thrown around a little bit because, old man Jamison Crowder is not going to have any of it. And, I'm sure Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson are going to be, not thrilled with that. Look, the Commanders have, I think, a very good set of offensive pieces. Their running game, Austin Eckler, Brian Robinson Jr., even Chris Rodriguez Jr., the kid out of Kentucky, excellent runners. The wide receiver core, we talked about McLaurin and Dotson. They're good. Tight ends, Zach Ertz is still hanging on to his 19th season in the NFL or something weird like that. So they've got pieces there, but it all comes down to that quarterback play and whether or not Jaden Daniels can be the guy. Now, the one thing that will probably help him is that the Commanders swiped Tyler Biadasz from the Cowboys for a 3-year deal. So that's a guy who's played in this division, who knows how to help younger quarterbacks or not star quarterbacks, because he was big with Cooper Rush back when Prescott was hurt a couple of years ago. So that'll probably help them out too. And by the way, Bobby Wagner's on this team now.
Yeah.
Okay, join the club, Bobby. That's great.
Quick 1-year deal.
I think this is a year of just breathing if you're in Washington, because gone is the specter of Dan Snyder, obviously. Ron Rivera's gone. Eric Bieniemy's gone. It feels like a totally new identity with this ownership group and this coaching staff. And yeah, Cliff Kingsbury's there as the OC. Whatever, so be it. It is what it is at this point. You can't win them all. But it feels like this is just a breathe season for them. It doesn't feel like Justin said, I don't see them challenging. I don't see them being super competitive. I see them being close in some games, but not competitive down to the end of the season.
Right.
But you have to go in like that. Like, you caught lightning in a bottle when he drafted RG3 and they won the division in their first year, but that's because, this division's so unpredictable. And I'm going to go back to one of our previous episodes. I did give the Commanders a 4 in our worst to first rankings because I liked what they were doing at that point in time. But looking at their schedule now and looking at how late their bye is, it's not the year for them. Right. They'll make positive steps, but it's not the year for them at all.
Yeah. And this is just one of those things where it's really telling how your perception of a team can change in the offseason from, thoughts about them even 6 weeks ago to now, and how you take everything into account with not just them, but now their schedule, their division, the other teams, etc. I think kind of what Justin alluded to, Rick, and both you and I as hockey fans have seen this, where teams will, get veterans in an offseason, right? And then either a year or two later, they're going to be dealt. That's probably going to be the case here, realistically, if you're Washington, because, I like that Bobby Wagner's there, and this really doesn't happen in the NFL, so maybe he's not going to get traded, but if they're really bad, do you not do him right? And you've been here, you've helped establish things, and then trade him to a contender. Like you mentioned, I think Daron Payne's contract is the more recent one, but between him and Allen, you probably are going to have to make a choice between one of those two of trading one of them. Yeah. At the trade deadline, and no one else really on the defense to write home about. I gotta wonder about Terry McLaurin, and is he going to be okay with this situation and how much longer he'll be fine with it? Maybe if Jaden Daniels is good enough, it'll be enough to subsidize those issues for another year. But this Washington team, like Justin kind of alluded to, they could be a seller come the trade deadline. 2-3 guys on this team could end up going once again. So we'll see. Washington, and we've said this multiple times, through the years, this is year 3 now of us doing division breakdowns. We've said this about multiple teams in the past. We've definitely gotten it wrong in the past, at least once. But, this is probably a team where just hope the young players do well. That's what this is. You just said it. I think you summarized it perfectly. Breathe, realize what the team is, and just cheer for Jaden Daniels getting 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, and limiting the turnovers. Right? Cheer for Luke McCaffrey, young receiver on this team. Cheer for him to get 70 yards in a game. Cheer for individual performances, because the team results aren't always going to be there. Although randomly in both games against Philly, they're going to somehow compete because they've been doing that for the last 2 years.
And again, the other thing too, cheer at the end of the game, whether you win 17-14 or you lose 34-9. Cheer if no one gets hurt.
Yeah,
because that's the big thing for Washington. Is that if you mirror it with RG3, he was good in his first season. They won the division. It was out of left field, and then what happened after that?
Yeah,
his career never was the same because he got hurt so many times. Mitigate that. If you can mitigate that, if Jaden Daniels can get through year 1 unscathed, that's as good as a Super Bowl win, I think, for Washington.
Yeah. And you also have the 2 veteran quarterbacks there that, I'm going to be real with you, if you're down 20 points in the fourth quarter, there's no point in getting Jaden Daniels hurt.
No. Put in Mariota or, put in Driscoll.
No.
Have one of them. That way you're not forcing it with Daniels, and that way, he can kind of learn and see. Maybe he throws 3 picks in one game and he gets, you bench him for Mariota so he can kind of learn. It's not, again, you have to do this the right way. You can't do this like how Matt Nagy did with Justin Fields, and you can't do it like how Adam Gase did with Zach Wilson. You can't do that. If a guy's making the mistakes that he doesn't have it, you pull him. He learns, and then he comes back the next game, and it's fine. Even if Mariota throws 15 for 15 in garbage time, it's garbage time. This is still Jaden Daniels' team.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see, if the Commanders, like we mentioned, if maybe a game or 2 stretch where they will be competitive, but realistically, this is going to be a team that is going to be picking up very high in the draft. But if they think that they maybe have their guy, the best position in the world is to have a top 5 pick, but not need a quarterback, because then you help the rest of your team and you can support it with a rookie contract for another pivotal position. I will say on the injury front, Rick, it's a great point you bring up, because there is one team that the Commanders are going to be hoping that Jaden Daniels can escape injury from. And it's not because this team injures players because of the players. It's because this team will injure players because of the turf. Ladies and gentlemen, the New York Giants are the next team that we're going to be talking about here. And 2023 was a rough year in year 2 for the Daboll and Joe Schoen era. Now, look, some people knew that they were winning in an unsustainable way in 2022 and knew that the bottom was going to fall out of that barrel eventually last season. But, hey, 2024 is the new year. And
I want to point out also, those people that said that weren't in the finale of the pick challenge. So
yeah. Well, in certain ways,
Justin and I were, but you,
in other ways.
Yeah,
I was still right about the.
I said they weren't going to make the playoffs last year, and I said they were probably going to have a losing record.
You weren't as harsh about it as your Albanian compatriot was. So
yeah, I think if they didn't have as many injuries as they did, they probably would have done slightly better.
Yeah,
but I still think that they would have. Listen, they had an easy. Well, we don't have to talk about it. Anyways,
second worst team in the division last year, the New York Giants. Look, just to kind of allude to it, it was injuries. Daniel Jones didn't play, which I'm not going to lie, sometimes could be a good thing for your team. Various skill position players in a team that was already needing skill position players last year worked 100%. And the offensive line was, mimicked the MTA turnstiles. Now, but the funny part is the offensive line did that when healthy sometimes, because Evan Neal was essentially a turnstile for a majority of last season. And he wants to say that we're not allowed to talk about football in any way. Maybe you should block a little bit better here, but this Giants team, looked at the issues of last season, and Joe Schoen and them went to work. They made the massive deal for Brian Burns, which they won that trade by a landslide, pennies on the dang dollar. Robbing Dave Tepper and the Carolina Panthers blind, basically, with that one. Didn't have to give up as much as you think. Malik Neighbors, getting him in the draft, next to guys like Adarius Slayton. A Jalen Hyatt who's entering year 2, right? Like you have some young players there that the ball could get thrown to. You have Devin Singletary, who's now going to take over as the RB1 on that team. It probably is actually going to be more running back by committee realistically, but in theory, just from a talent and name perspective, he is the biggest name in the running back room at this point of time. You're hoping the offensive line can step back up, and you're hoping this defense, like I said, with a Brian Burns who's just coming in, but with Bobby Okereke, year 2, joining him in that linebacker core, right? A Dexter Lawrence, who fresh contract here recently, like he's motivated. Kayvon Thibodeau is entering year 3 of his career, and a decent secondary. The secondary isn't anything to write home about. I think they've had on paper better secondaries in previous years, but this is still a relatively solid, unit for the most part. They're probably going to need a lot of support, if we're being honest, from the front 7 to do well. But that is the idea of the New York Giants, and to me, I think the biggest thing, even outside of on the field production for this team, is just going to be the perception of year 3 of the Daboll and Joe Schoen era. I was telling Justin pre-show about this. This is ultimately going to be my point of view. I don't know if this is going to be that smooth of a year for the G-men, but I don't think that's a reason to just give up on Daboll. I don't think it is, because this was my perspective when he signed the contract. This is my perspective when it's the last season. This was my perspective during last season. This is my perspective now. And this is all on video, so I have the proof. I'm not a Daniel Jones guy. I don't think he could be a franchise quarterback. I don't think he should be a quarterback being paid $35, $40, $45 million. He just should not be any of those things. And I think Brian Daboll's has to be with a guy who had one decent season that he was overcompensated for. And I think because apparently when he signed the deal, the whole thing was, they could get out of the contract early. I hope for their sake it's after this season is when they could do that, because Daniel Jones, unless he becomes Jordan Love, unless he becomes a Brock Purdy, unless he becomes randomly Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, I'm sorry, I can't be confident in him, in his skill. The only thing you could be confident in is if Daboll can do what he did in year one, which is limit his mistakes, hide him, and that defense and running game take over. That's how they made the playoffs in year one. That's how they're going to have to do it again. So if you're asking me where I would put my faith on this team, it would be if the coaching staff can do something spectacular again. But that's still going to be a bit of a task. So that's where it is for me. Rick, your thoughts about the New York Football Giants?
All the eggs are in the Daniel Jones basket. They are, because they had the opportunity to take a quarterback or to move around so that they could, reshore that up. That was part of what they were thinking of doing, and they elected not to with their first pick. They went with Malik Neighbors, the electric wide receiver out of LSU with the number 6 pick, which, could have been an offensive lineman had the Chargers not swiped Joe Alt, but that's revisionist history at its best. You swap Saquon Barkley for Devin Singletary. The running style is kind of the same. Singletary, maybe a bit more of a hard-nosed rusher, whereas Barkley kind of has that more significant injury history. And you wanted to pay Singletary less, as we're finding out on Hard Knocks with the Giants. You didn't want to pay Barkley the money that he got paid by Philadelphia. So be it. It is what it is. You have Neighbors and Hyatt as your top 2 guys. Wan'Dale's still there. Isaiah Hodgins is still there for them. Their tight end room is devoid of Darren Waller. Thank all the gods of all the denominations you want to pray to, because he was a disaster when he was here. So now it's Daniel Bellinger. They drafted Theo Johnson. Lawrence Cage was there. They did not really address the offensive line in the draft because they believe that they have the right guys, which means Evan Neal has to, step up and be a big boy, but he's probably not going to be. John Runyon's a good guard for them, but again, he's also on the older side now. Not really. I mean, 26, but still, 26 for an all lineman is still pretty old. I mean, depends on how you're blocking, depends on how your knees are holding up. This defense is good. Look, I mean, we've talked about this defense time and time again about how they can be. Having Brian Burns now makes them a much better, prolific linebacker core. And their secondary, they added Tyler Nubin. They added Drew Phillips in the draft. They still have, their guys in Deontay Banks and Cordell Flott. But it all comes down to Daniel Jones. And it all comes down to this notion that Daniel Jones is the guy. And if he's not the guy, you wasted all that time and energy on not getting the right quarterback into this system. You trusted what he had. He was hurt last year. You trusted that he can bounce back and have a better year. And what was one of the things that we said last year, Jurg, with the Giants, was that when we did our coaching hot seat o-meter way back when. Justin, I think, was at a wedding or was at a sleepaway camp or whatever it was. One of the things we said
it was a sleepaway camp wedding.
There you go. Lovely. One of the things that we said was about Brian Daboll was that this year he got a pass. Because last year was so unexpected and the expectations were so low that he surprised everybody. That
Year one.
He won. They had a winning record. They got to the playoffs. They beat the Fraud Kings. And they got, handed their asses by the Vikings. But at the same time, there were no expectations. So last year was what year one could have been and probably should have been. This year, it's a little different. If it doesn't work right away, and I got to be honest with you, I have it working for the first 2 weeks.
Oh.
And that's it. After the first 2 weeks, because, again, one of the things you and I like to do is look at schedules. This is a tough schedule for them.
Yeah.
This is a very tough schedule for them to it's not just who they're playing, it's how they're bouncing around. Because I'll take you through weeks 3, 4, and 5, just so you have an idea of how that goes after the first 2 games. They host Dallas week 3. They fly across the country to Seattle week 4. They come back in week 5 and host the Bengals. Now,
well, don't forget, Rick, there's an away game actually in there against the Browns as well.
Oh yeah, well, I've been 4 through 6 because the Browns are here or there.
I mean that defense though,
the defense
just the Browns defense.
But again, unless you can enlist the turf monster for a 5-year, $120 million contract to hamper Burrow again in week 6, you're not beating the Bengals. Unless you can, sacrifice a baby goat to have him take out Dak Prescott, not going to happen. So I don't know. I mean, they'll be competitive. They'll be very competitive, but I think they will suffer, and it will be because of the offense, and it will be because of their general behind the line under center. And I think Giants fans will come to realize that this decision that they made to not take a quarterback or to not try and get a higher priority free agent quarterback will hurt them in the end and force them to go looking for a quarterback in the 25 NFL draft. Or Drew Lock is the answer midseason.
What a change that would be.
Yeah.
Arch Manning is clearly what they're going after next. They're trying to make it a Manning dynasty in New York.
Yeah.
Justin, your thoughts about the New York Giants?
So just a real quick point. Here's where I don't think it's going to be as rough of a game against a team like the Cincinnati Bengals, is because that Brian Burns trade has made it so if you do not have a good offensive line, this Giants team is going to punish you. They are. And I'm not saying that I think they're going to beat the Bengals, because I still think the Bengals win that game. They're just that much better of a team. But it's going to be a closer game than people realize, because Joe Burrow is going to spend a lot of time on his back, because for whatever reason, they can never get that offensive line figured out in Cincinnati. It's been, 4 years now? And it's been rough. I think that the Giants may take a step forward compared to last year. And by that, I mean, I do think they stay a little bit healthier. I think that obviously this is the last chance Evan Neal, I believe, is going to have as a starter. I don't necessarily know he figures it out, but the point being, I think that they have a better team around Daniel Jones than they ever had. And that is even with the loss of Saquon Barkley. Don't get me wrong. The running game is not going to be the same. They're going to need help, and they're going to need to supplement things. And if you're telling me they're trying to make moves at the trade deadline or with free agent running backs 3, 4, 5 weeks into the season, I'm not surprised. But I think this is the best receiving core that they've had. I think this is the best defense that they've had in the Daniel Jones era. That being said, I think that this is still more of a status quo thing. I'm not willing to take a risk right now. I'm picking the Giants to win the division. I'm not really willing to risk them getting a wild card spot. I just don't see it. I think that their schedule is a little too hard. They're in a tough division. I still think that the Cowboys and the Eagles are going to be good. I think Washington always plays division games tough. And middle of the pack, really, for the Giants. A step forward. A year that puts maybe DaBoll and Shane in a little bit of a sauna, so to speak. But I don't see them lighting the world on fire like a lot of people did after their first year together. And I'm talking to DaBoll and Shane. I don't think it's going to be as tough as it was last year, because last year, unfortunately, they ended up with a tougher schedule because of their success the year before. But I think you're going to see a little bit of a return to, oh, is Brian DaBoll a really good coach? Like, he was coach of the year his rookie year. They won 10 games, and a playoff game. Like, they could maybe be something there. I don't necessarily think Daniel Jones is the answer long term, but I don't necessarily think Daniel Jones is a quarterback that you can't win with. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do after the season.
Yeah. To say the very least, it could end up being 2025 divisional breakdowns is when we give the Giants a little bit more praise, to say the very least. But like you guys have mentioned, and we definitely put in the description of this video, it has been 2 decades basically since we've had a repeat winner in the NFC East. And will that happen? Well, we'll see. This is the team that most would project as the best chance to break that up in terms of, well, to continue that streak, because the Cowboys won the division. The Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah, I know. I tripped over it a little bit, but I was thinking because they were the last team to win multiple division titles in a row here. But the Philadelphia Eagles, look, 2023 started out hot. I'm pretty sure they were the hottest team to start last season. I think they may have been the last undefeated team. And then it completely fell apart for a number of reasons. You could say Jalen Hurts was a little bit hurt, pun not intended. You could say the receivers were also a bit dinged up. Maybe yes, maybe no. Various things. teams get injured at the end of the day. And while I actually, compared to most, am one to think injuries play a greater factor in a team not performing well than most, there were clear issues with this squad. Look, there's talent all over. Jalen Hurts is the quarterback. Whatever your opinion of him, he's still a relatively talented QB. Saquon Barkley, they added him in the offseason, taking him away from the Giants. That dynamic style of running back, which they were just missing last year. All due respect to the running back room that they had a year ago, there wasn't anyone in there as talented as Saquon Barkley was, just straight up. Receiving core, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, the veteran Paris Campbell. They're hoping for something to happen there. Offensive line, no Jason Kelsey. So that's a bit of a loss. You're going to hope that one of these guys that you've drafted over the last couple of years can take over on the interior. You have Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson still as your bookend tackles. That's solid. And then defensively, young Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, you hope that the two of them really take that next step into being the faces of this interior defensive line going forward for the next 5, 6, 7+ years. You hope you get something now out of Nakobe Dean and Nolan Smith Jr. Notice I'm saying a bunch of Georgia players for a reason, because that's all they drafted for a couple of years. But you have Devin White, who you got in on I believe it was just a 1-year deal in free agency. That guy was a bookend player for a Lombardi-winning Super Bowl team, right, in his rookie season. And you have a defensive backfield that, you brought back CJ into the fold and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. You still have the veterans there in Bradbury and Big Play Slay. But you got some young players there in Quinion Mitchell as one of the young corners that they drafted. And Cooper DeJean is going to be someone that, they'll figure out into the mold there. The Eagles are talented. There's only so many flaws that they have. That can't be denied. They're talented. To me, the most interesting thing about this team, and I kind of mirror this to what I would have said last season going in for the Buffalo Bills, the balance of the passing and the running game, to me, is the key here. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles had 22 rushing touchdowns last season. 15 of them came from Jalen Hurts. And I don't have the exact math, but I'm willing to bet at least half of those came from the tush push. You need a better, more balanced offensive attack for Philly. You just need that. Because unless he takes another step forward, Jalen Hurts hasn't proven himself to be a guy that could definitively win you a number of games with just his arm. He could do it for a game if his running attack is also going, but just pure arm talent. He's probably not in the upper echelon of QBs. So to me, the key for this team, as much as we maybe want to blame the defense, and I think the defense was being blamed last season towards the end, I still think the anemicness of the offense was the biggest culprit of the collapse last year, and that can't be acceptable, especially in a division like this, where I'm mainly talking about their highest competitor, where the quarterback was an MVP candidate who was, over 4,500 passing yards? You need really good offense to win in this league. And that's what the Eagles are going to have to put back up in 2024. So that's just my thing for them. Justin, Philadelphia Eagles, 2024. What do we got?
So let's start with the offense, because they made a major addition, stealing away Saquon Barkley from the Giants. And this is a really interesting move for them because they're a run-first team. They've been a run-first team for the last at least 3-4 years. I mean, don't get me wrong, the addition of A.J. Brown made that offense hum. Devontae Smith is absolutely a top 25 receiver in my mind in this league. They have good ball catchers, but they made their money on short yardage situations and running the ball. DeAndre Swift, if you remember, was an MVP candidate the first half of last year. He was incredible. Things slowed down for the team. They kind of figured out that they're going to make Jalen Hurts beat you with his arm. A.J. Brown missed some time. Devontae Smith was a little banged up. Jalen Hurts was banged up. Things didn't go their way last year. It's good to be good, but sometimes you need a little bit of luck on your side, and the Eagles just didn't have it. This year, they have Saquon now, which is arguably the best running back they've had there in a long time. The issue here is, one, this is not necessarily the same offensive line that there was last year. We believe in Howie Roseman drafting linemen. It's just been a staple in this league for a long time now. But is Cam Jurgens going to be Jason Kelsey? Anywhere near Jason Kelsey? That's a major thing, especially for their patented play the tush push, because he was the driving force behind that stuff.
Yep.
So Do they have that extra yard in them every down this year? Remember, it'll remain to be seen. Is Saquon still Saquon Barkley? I mean, he had a fantastic year last year, but this is another year now where this dude has taken a ton of hits. He missed games last year. He's going to take the brunt of the force of this Eagles offense. And as much as I love Saquon Barkley, he's 27 years old. He's got bad knees. He's got tons of injury history. And now he's going to take the pressure and the force, the physical force of arguably the best run game system in the league and a winning team for the first time in recent memory for him. Do his knees hold up? This is a major boomer bust situation for them, because this could look like the best move the Eagles have made in 15 years. And then this could also look like it didn't really work out. It was a nice in theory, but come on, we knew what this was.
Yep.
It's such a toss-up that I'm not sure which direction this Eagles offense goes this year. I like their defense. I like the moves that they made. I think they brought back some of that depth that they needed at the secondary that they lost last year. But the Eagles offense, make no mistake about it, for the last 3 years, including their Super Bowl year, they went as the run game went. And they have a major change now in their offensive line and a major change at running back. There's not a ton behind it. I mean, as much as I like the guys that they have, Kenneth Gainwell is the number 2, and Will Shipley is the number 3 there, according to ESPN.
Yeah.
If Saquon goes down, they are going to be in a lot of trouble, because that team is going to every defense that they play, including the strong pass rushing teams like Washington and New York and Dallas, who play them all twice a year, are going to stack that box and make Jalen Hurts beat them with his arm. And that is a major question mark at this point. He's improved as a passer through his career consistently. Every year, I think his accuracy has improved. It might not have shown up statistically last year, but I don't think that was because of him. I think that was more extenuating circumstances. He was banged up. His receivers were banged up. He was forced to be in longer and rougher offensive situations in terms of like down and distance last year than he has ever faced. But they are going to have to prove that Saquon will beat you if you give him the opportunity, and Jalen Hurts can pass the ball. And it's just, in my mind, a new situation for this Eagles team. I think that losing the division last year is going to ultimately benefit them, because they're going to have a obviously weaker schedule than the Dallas Cowboys. But that doesn't mean that they're going to have an easy schedule by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I think that they open up against the Green Bay Packers, which is tough because Green Bay, I think, is a much better team than people were willing to give them credit for last year. And they showed it in the playoffs last year, because they can really, really beat down a team. Their defense is excellent as well. And I think that they have a good young core on offense. They play the NFC South for 3 straight games, and then they have a bye week. And then they hit, in my mind, what's a gauntlet of teams. Cleveland is going to get after the passer and going to stop the run. The Giants are going to get after, and they have a strong defensive line. The Bengals are just the cream of the crop of the NFL. The Jacksonville Jaguars, I think, take another a bounce back year this year. Dallas is going to get after you. Washington's going to get after you. Los Angeles is going to get after you. You know, like, actually, maybe Los Angeles is different. We can talk about that when we get to that. But, like, they have a gauntlet of a schedule after their week 5 bye.
Yep.
Can this team stay healthy? Can he take hits? Can he move forward as a running back? And look, the Eagles were smart. This is a prove-it deal for Saquon. They're not tied to him after this year. But right, it was a 1-year deal, right? Or was it a 2-year with an option to get out?
No, I think it was a 3-year deal.
It's a
3-year
3-year deal, 37.75 million. Yeah.
Front loaded?
I believe front loaded. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, it's easy to get out after a year or two. Very little dead cap from what I'm hearing. But
unless he puts up 1,500 yards both seasons, they're not keeping him for year 3.
No, not a chance.
Well, as nice as 1,500 yards are, it's about winning.
Yep.
If he takes him to the promised land,
I mean, no, if he's putting up 1,500 yards and they're not winning, that's on Jalen Hurts. Like, you finally have a running back that can do that. That's on the court. Stop trying to blame the running back. That's on the quarterback if he can't figure it out.
I'm not blaming the running back. I'm telling you that they should win. That winning is the most important thing.
No, I agree. But if you have a running back with 1,500 yards and you're not winning,
I do think a healthy prime Saquon Barkley is enough to help this team take another step. It is. They are a good football team. But are you getting a healthy Saquon Barkley?
Yeah.
And how many hits is he going to take behind the offensive line that doesn't have its core anchor in the center anymore?
Yeah. Yep. All right, Rick, throw it over to you to finish off the conversation. Of course, we talked a lot about the offense, which, of course, give your take on. But do you think defensively, there's a lot of young kids that are expected to take up a role on this team, right? Like Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith Jr., Jordan Davis played a bit last year or the last 2 years. He's probably the most ready of those three. But even Jalen Carr, like, they're relying on and if you include Quinion Mitchell, who, according to this, is projected to be starting across from Darius Slay, that's 5 players who all of them have 3 years or less experience in the league. Like, yep. Are there any questions you think about their defense being a bit younger compared to previous years, or do you think that's more of a benefit for them actually?
Oh yeah, no, I got a lot of questions about this Eagles team. I really do, because it's not just, Jurg, you mentioned Jason Kelsey, but another guy that retired who is on the defense, who they lost, who may not show up in the stat sheet, but is this heart and soul of the team, Fletcher Cox is gone. Yeah. Fletcher Cox is not on the team anymore. They replaced him with Bryce Huff, who they gamble like the Barkley deal. The Eagles gambled on Bryce Huff's excellent season last year with the Jets and gave him 3 years and I think $51 million. So that defensive line is Bryce Huff and Jalen Carter and Brandon Graham and who? There's not. I don't see a lot of other names there too. One other thing, Justin mentioned, if Saquon gets hurt, the Eagles have very little running back depth. What if Jalen Hurts gets hurt? Who's the
every team with a quarterback with that the starting caliber quarterback? No.
But here's my point. If Daniel Jones gets hurt again for the Giants, oh well, we have Drew Lock. Whatever, fine.
Which in some instances that might be an upgrade.
Yeah. If Jaden Daniels gets hurt for the Commanders, oh well, we have Mariota or Driscoll. We're fine. If Dak Prescott gets hurt for the Cowboys, we have Cooper Rush. It's not the best situation in the world, but he did go 6-0 for us. If Jalen Hurts gets hurt, Kenny Pickett is taking over this team.
And if Kenny Pickett gets hurt, your guy.
Tanner McKay.
That's the situation for most of these teams, though.
I agree with you.
The better the quarterback is, the bigger the gap is going to be between your starter and your backup.
Yeah, but I think the Eagles have such a big enough gap and such pressure on them this season that one of those 2 injuries is going to be the death knell already for this team. I think
I get what Rick's trying to say. I think what he's saying is that this team's
the quarterback
offense,
the quarterback's a bad example in that situation. I mean,
but I think
Jalen Hurts got hurt last year, and Gardner Minshew 2 years ago, and Gardner Minshew got starting.
But Kenny Pickett's not Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, I think that's what Rick's saying.
Gardner Minshew, though. The point is,
Kenny Pickett can do it. Is if the Giants and Commanders lost their quarterbacks, they're not expected to do much this year anyways. If the Cowboys lost Prescott, they have a capable backup in Cooper Rush that's there who knows the system, so it's fine. But the unknown of if your top 2 guys on offense go down, if Hurts and Barkley have to miss time, then you're relying on Kenny Pickett and Kenneth Gainwell to
the 2 Kens
to be that's that. And also, let's go through what happened last year too with the Eagles. Dallas Goedert went missing for 6 games.
Yeah, they signed CJ Uzomah.
Exactly, they signed another guy. So,
backup tight end.
But again, like a backup tight, exactly. Really, a backup tight end? Really? If we're going to go with, okay.
Look, I'll make the argument for Saquon. I just don't. There's nothing you could do about a backup. There's only so much you could do about a backup quarterback.
No, I agree. But that's the point that I'm more trying to make is that you're putting a modicum of trust in a guy who flamed out of Pittsburgh, and is basically. This is his last shot, I would say, so early in his career, because he had all that hype coming out of college, and now he's backing up a perennial top quarterback in this league. But the the gap to divide is so far from Hurts to Pickett. If you went the whole quarterback rankings, including backups, the gap is, I think, the furthest out of any other team in this league. And to your point too, this schedule is brutal because their bye is in week 5, which means you have to rely on Hurts and Barkley and all these other players not getting hurt from week 6 to week 18 in some capacity. There's shorter weeks too, I think. Week 10 to week 11, they go to Dallas. Then they got to turn around for a short week and host the Commanders on Thursday Night Football. It's not ideal because it's a tougher schedule. It's divisional games, but look, I agree. I think defensively, I think there are more questions than answers, and there's a lot of youth on this team. Don't get me wrong, but also the offensive line for this team is also going to really have to step it up. And yeah, to Justin's point, Cam Jurgens might not be the guy, but do you know who else they picked up? Mekhi Becton. Was he ever the guy in New York?
Yeah, he's more a backup, really.
Yeah,
I know, but again,
Mekhi Becton, his issue was that he couldn't stay healthy and he could never string enough time to understand the game. His first season, if you look at when he played like the most that he played, he was starting to pancake guys left and right. He's a physically gifted and talented player. His injury history and unfortunately at times his weight got in the way of him really stringing it together for the Jets, and the Jets just didn't have the time to keep going.
Right, and so the Eagles might have more time, but again, what happens if Lane Johnson gets hurt and Becton has to go in immediately?
I mean, that's the issue. That's the issue with a veteran team. One, especially with linemen.
Yep.
And 2, that's the issue with every team. What if the guys get hurt? And don't get me wrong, the Eagles, you're right. They have a lot of places on their team where if one guy gets hurt, what are you going to do? Which is not.
Well, I would also say the reason Rick's saying this is because the injury history. Because it feels like the Eagles compared to the Cowboys. It's not just age. It's injury history. Like Jalen Hurts was hurt last year. Saquon Barkley was hurt last year. Lane Johnson throughout his career has gotten hurt. I think even on the defensive side, which one of those Georgia boys when they drafted him basically missed their whole rookie season because they were coming in with a draft injury?
Dean had the injury in the draft and he fell. But also too, one of the key catalysts to their drop last year was that one of their star receivers was hurt. AJ Brown was hurt. And so it was Devontae Smith and Britton Covey. He wasn't exactly the guy, and they brought in Paris Campbell and John Ross, and none of them strike fear in me. So I don't know. I mean, I think this could be one of those rare years for the Eagles where because they didn't draft a offensive lineman early enough or do what they normally do and they went corner, it may come back to bite them. They could be a really good pass defense, don't get me wrong, but I'm a little worried about their offense. I'm a little worried about that early start. They have that game in Brazil against the Packers week 1. And then again, you have to exercise your demons in week 4 in Tampa. Then you go on a bye. You think all's well and good. And who's coming back in? As Justin said, Cleveland's defense. Rough stuff for them. I think this could be a troubling year in Philadelphia. I know a lot of people say, this is going to be a bounce back year. I'm not on that train. I'm not sold on that just yet. I don't think this is a team that is going to be competing for a double-digit win season like everybody else thinks. And I think that, the unfortunate combination of the injury history of some of these guys combined with the fact that they have a gauntlet from week 6 on could be problematic for them. So I worry, not really, because it's the Eagles and, Philadelphia.
You're almost, if you're Philly, you kind of wish, maybe not 14 like Washington has, but you definitely wish it was flipped to where you had more of a week 9-10 bye week, give you that halfway point in the season. And if you're Washington, you wish you had that week 5 or 6 bye week to settle some of the kids down and give them a week off break before going for the rest of the season. Very interesting to say the very least, and we'll see how all that plays into effect. Because of course, all 3 of these teams are trying to knock down the team that wore the NFC East crown and that's the only crown they ever end up wearing at the end of seasons if they get to that point. The Dallas Cowboys, the team that won the division last year before their own playoff flameout, and being the first ever team to lose to the 7th seed in the postseason. Congrats, Dallas. Congrats. So, quick rundown of this lineup. Dak Prescott starting once again, phenomenal last season, was an MVP candidate. He was good. Fell a little bit short of the MVP at the end, of course, but put up numbers last year. Wide receiving room, their top 2 guys are CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks. CeeDee Lamb is the definitive alpha of that wide receiving room. The question is, can one of these young guys that they have behind them step up to be that third option? Maybe is it Jalen Tolbert? Maybe is it Kavontae Turpin? A couple of guys who have been drafted later on in the last couple of years. A tight end room where, the last names in this tight end room, you got Ferguson, Schoonmaker, and Hendershot. Like, just based off of last names, that's the best tight end room in the NFL.
It's a law firm.
It's honestly, yeah, Ferguson and Hendershot. That is a law firm right there. That'll help you get everything you need on an accident, probably caused by a Georgia player. Anyways, but it's a decent enough tight end room. An offensive line where the left side is going to be significantly younger than what we're used to seeing. You have Tyler Smith, who was a former first-round pick, I believe, a few years ago, and then Tyler Guyton, who was a first or second round pick in this past
first round pick, yeah.
First round pick. So you got a couple first round picks there on the left side. Zach Martin, really the only veteran left on this team. Just everyone around him is left, from Tyrone Smith finally leaving in free agency this past year, and then the former center, Travis Frederick, who retired 2 or 3 years ago at this point. Yeah. So it is a younger offensive line than Dallas has had in quite a while. And then defensively, we know the head of the snake on the defense is Micah Parsons. What support is he going to get from guys, behind him? They brought in Eric Kendricks, who was originally going to San Fran, if I'm not mistaken, but then reneged on the offer, ends up going now to Dallas. So it's a decent core there. But just pass rush production to me is the key here, because I think DeMarcus Lawrence didn't have as many sacks last season as I thought he did. It's him or someone else on that team. I forget off the top of my head, but they need a little bit more of their depth behind their top guys to really perform there, to give that support. And then the secondary, if healthy, a very interesting secondary with Trevon Diggs, who is really – it's kind of funny because I consider Deron Bland, what he did last year, the comparison to what Trevon Diggs was before 2023 of he's either going to get you an interception or he's going to let up a 30-yard touchdown, because that's what Deron Bland kind of was for Dallas last year. Diggs has kind of evolved from that to being a more well-rounded corner. Now, if you have both of those guys healthy, with Jordan Lewis there as your nickel back in a lot of coverages, but as your reliable third corner, very interesting, with decent safeties there in Wilson and Hooker. So this Dallas team, they're looking to become the first repeat NFC East champions in about 2 decades. The question is, can they do it? Rick, what do you think their odds are of doing so?
Well, there's a name that you forgot to mention, because somebody is back for the Cowboys this year.
Oh, yeah, I did that on purpose because I wanted one of you to be the first one to say it.
It feels like it's 2017 all over again, because it's Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott. Zeke is back. I don't know what he's going to do, but he's back. Look, this was a Cowboys team that when they relied on that offense, and they relied on Deron Bland having an incredible year, because when Diggs went down early, we were all concerned about the secondary. Deron Bland showed up, and he was huge. When they scored over 30 points, they won 10 games. Like, I think 2 of their wins were they scored like 20 or 28 or whatever. But when they were over 30 points, you couldn't touch them. There is pressure on this team going into this season, because it's not just the retirements of Leighton Vander Esch, and it's not just the losses of Tony Pollard and Tyron Smith. I think a big key was Tyler Biadasz. I think having him as a center was a huge key for them. And so the question is, who's going to be that guy? It's probably going to be Brock Hoffman, because Tyler Guyton is 6'8". I don't think he's going to slide over and play center from a tackle spot. I think he's going to be your other tackle, along with, I think, Terrence Steele or Matt Waletzko are still there. Maybe the other guy drafted, Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State. He could be a center prospect here. So I said the Eagles had a lot of pressure because of how their season ended. Well, Dallas has enough pressure too. Because, again, the Cowboys are starved for anything positive, anything. This is going to mark 30 years since they last went to a Super Bowl. If you can believe that. 30 years.
Can I just cut in for a second?
Yeah.
It's hard being a Jets fan. They've
It
had
is.
winning records. They've had winning records for like 15 straight years, and they're starved for anything good. How do you think I feel? All right?
Listen, Justin, I'm a
Go
Jets
on.
fan
No,
too.
go on.
Don't forget that.
I had to cut it. Okay.
Don't forget that. I'm a Jets fan too. But
know.
I think for to deviate onto that, for us, like, it's almost comical. You know, like we have our team has seasons where they're really good, and there's seasons where it's like by week 2 we're like, well, let's look at the college and see who it is. The Cowboys don't have that because there's that aura and that mystique of America's team this and America's team that. And, you know, Dak Prescott and Micah Parsons have that aura of being offensive player, defensive player of the year consistently. And, you know, they did not do a whole heck of a lot in free agency this year. Aside from Kendricks and Elliott, they just added Royce Freeman to be, I guess, their 3rd string or 4th string running back behind Rico Dowdle and Snoop Connor, I guess, and Deuce Vaughn. So maybe 5th. I don't know. I think this is the year that we have a repeat winner in this division. I do, because I look at Dallas and I look at, you know, the way that I see this team shaking out, and I think that they have a lot of favorable matchups at home for them. And the ones that are on the road, too, tend to kind of play into their favor. I mean, week 5, they go to Pittsburgh. Who knows who's going to be the starting quarterback there for the Steelers? You know, week 14, they host Cincinnati. You know, and the Bengals are going to be better, but that's a home game. You kind of tend to play better at home than on the road. I think their schedule benefits them. I think it does. I think if Mike McCarthy wants to keep his job in Dallas, you've got to win the division, be that first team to win back-to-back years, and also win a gosh darn playoff game, because that's the thing. That's the sting that's going to happen. And I'll spoil this for you right now. They lose week 1 in my schedule. And when we start to have some question marks, because I'll tell you who week 1 they have. They go to Cleveland week 1. That defense, week 1, against maybe not a fully set Cowboys offense, I think you could see it. Lock it in right now in July 13th. That's my upset pick for week 1 right there. I'm calling my 4-pointer for upset pick because I think the Browns are going to be the underdog at home to the Cowboys, but I think they can do it.
That'd be hilarious if one of us just chooses to steal it.
Yeah, why not? You know, I mean, it's fine. I mean, you guys would have first pick since you were, you know, the losers last year, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, no, we make the pick order depending on the first game usually.
Well, but there are 2 games, right? There's the Thursday and the Friday game now, so we kind of have to like really throw that in the flux almost. I think the Cowboys, if they're fully healthy, they can be a top 2 seed this year. I don't think they're going to be fully healthy, but I think they're going to have enough to reclaim the division title and keep hold of it for this season, because I think there's enough talent there and not a lot of questions that I have to really dare me to go another way. So that's my thought.
All right. Justin, your thoughts about the Dallas Cowboys and their quest to try to repeat as NFC East champs?
So I have 2 question marks in my mind when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys. And is one, can the secondary fix that boomer bust issue that they had last year, where it was either a long touchdown or an interception? And I think that's very important, because I think it cost them a lot of games where Dak had issues getting it started. If you remember, especially late down the stretch, they had a chance to win the conference, I think. They were like right behind the 49ers, and they had, at the very least, a chance to be the 2 seed. They were the 2 seed, or they were the 3 seed?
They were the 2.
Either way, they had chances to sew things up early. They had chances to guarantee Dak Prescott's MVP candidacy, and they just couldn't get it done on both sides of the ball. The second question is, did they fix the run game? And I think that's a major question, because, one, they re-signed Zeke, which I don't know if is good or bad. He had a decent year last year in New England. It's going to be weird going forward to see him ever in a jersey that was not a Cowboys jersey.
Yeah.
But two, part of what made Zeke so good his entire career was the 1-2 punch.
Mhm.
And the Cowboys got away from that last year, which I think is part of the reason why also Tony Pollard struggled, because they didn't have that number 2 punch. Well, they don't have that number 2 punch again this year. Rico Dowdle was okay last year. Deuce Vaughn was okay last year. But it's not Zeke and Pollard. It's not what they've historically had the last few years. So it's going to be interesting to see how they move forward. I still don't understand why they didn't pick up the phone and call Derrick Henry. Makes no sense to me. They could have done both realistically.
Yeah.
And been like, what are you going to do? For real. Like, if I'm a linebacker, I'm not excited to wake up the day after playing a game against the Cowboys if they had Zeke and Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
That sounds like it hurts. So, and I don't care how old they are. They could be in their retirement home. I don't want to play against both of them at the same time. Just don't. So that's an interesting move to me. But those are the two major problems. Because realistically, the Cowboys are a pretty complete team. And we could talk about, postseason failures and does Dak have what it takes? Is he really a winner? Can McCarthy coach them up to win a playoff game? Like all that in a bag of chips. But you got to get there first. And this is a very complete football team with two very specific holes that I'm not sure they addressed properly.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see if they can do it, and it's going to be interesting to see how this regular season pans out. And maybe the first seed, once again, being in tow for them, being in sight, could this be the year they break through and get that? And could that make the difference for them in the postseason to where they know the road entirely runs through them no matter what? Granted, a couple of their losses the last few years have been in Dallas anyway, but regardless of the fact. The NFC East was a good, decent conversation. I think this next division will be much less of a conversation in terms of time length. But before we get to that, of course, we need to have our final division picks. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go from the bottom to the top in our predictions. But like what we started doing last year, the third team we will reveal will be our first seed in the division for 2024, not our second. So, I'll start this one off. My fourth seed in the NFC East for the 2024 season, I'm going to say it is the Washington Commanders. I don't think there's too much there to deliberate. While I think the Giants' Daniel Jones is still not that great, I think there's too much youth in Washington for them to make too much of an impact this year, especially at the start of the season. Young teams tend to be better at the end, not the start. I'll say Washington is the fourth seed. Justin?
I also have Washington as my fourth seed. I think it's close between them and the Giants. I do think that Washington maybe has a little bit more to be excited about in terms of a youth movement, but it's a tough schedule. It's going to be a tough year, and I think that they take a little bit longer to put together what they need to win.
Yeah, Washington for me goes 4-13. I have them not really. I don't have them being that competitive because I think their schedule is not a friend to them, and I think the fact that they have a late bye really hurts as well.
Yeah.
I think you'll see a lot more of Marcus Mariota or Jeff Driscoll than you would have liked to have seen out of this team. But yeah, I think this is a youth year for them, and it's a breathe year for them. Like you're not going to compete. Just take your time, breathe, and look towards 25 and try and get better for that year.
The object of the team this year is to build a base.
Yes.
They want something that they have a foundation where they can move. It is a brand new owner. It is a brand new GM. It is a brand new coaching staff. It is a brand new team.
Yep.
And they want to build a foundation for the future going forward.
Yep. And my objective for them is survive.
Yeah.
Don't
get through this year.
Yep. Get through this year.
All right, Rick, we'll just keep with you. Third place.
Giants, 6-11. I think this is, depending on how that 6-11 year goes, I think you might see Daboll have to fight for his job towards the end. I think that Daniel Jones plays well in the beginning, but the season-long toll takes him. And this is what I do believe. I do believe that Malik Neighbors goes over 1,000 yards this year. The more I've thought about that, the more I think that's that's definitely a possibility. But I think that there's just on those other drives where they don't get the ball to Neighbors, they're going to stall a little bit. And I think that's kind of where it's going to hurt them because a quick 3-and-out, even though this defense is good, a quick 3-and-out's never good for them because then they're back on the field, they're going to tire really easily, and then late in games, they're going to have problems. So, yeah, I think 6-11 is the high mark for the Giants. Is that better than last year? I don't know. I don't really think so, but it's good enough for them, I think.
Yeah, it's close. I will say, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to agree. They were 6-11 last year, by the way. So Rick has both those teams staying form in terms of record. Progress is not always linear, ladies and gentlemen.
Correct.
I'll also just say I have the Giants in third place. Like they'll be a little bit better than Washington, not by the widest of margins, and there's still a gap between them and the top two teams in that division. Again, to me, the hope is in 2025 if you're able to get rid of Daniel Jones and replace him. Who knows? That's not for these predictions. That's for future ones, of course. But Giants are my third place team, and I'd like to think that Justin's going to do so. So, Justin, confirm for us your third place, and then give us, we'll just keep it with you, your number one seed, your NFC East winner for this 2024 season.
Do you remember the 2 years ago when the Jets had such a great defense, but by the end of the year, they were giving up 30, 40 points a game because they spent so much time on the field?
Yep.
That's kind of what I see with the Giants here. I mean, I don't necessarily know if they're the same caliber defense. I don't know how good their secondary is comparatively, but I think they're going to get after the quarterback. I think they're going to punish a lot of teams early. You're going to see this team be strong and then kind of taper off towards the end of the year. It's going to be disappointing for Giants fans, and I think that there's something there to build upon, but I think that you're going to see a new quarterback there sooner rather than later. I have them and the Washington Commanders being pretty close. I think that both teams have around 6 or 7 wins because I do think that there's talent on both of these teams. I don't think either team is the worst team in the league. I think both teams have improved in the offseason, and I like what they did. But I don't see that going much farther than that. Now, I'm gonna shock you a little bit here because I'm a big fan of the Eagles in this division, and I picked them to be the first repeat. And I think that the Eagles are going to come out exactly like they did last year. I think they're going to set the world on fire. I think you're going to see them really, really dominate teams early on. And I think they're going to win games that you don't expect them to win. I think there's going to be games where, all right, Saquon's coming in a little banged up, and maybe they're playing like, I don't know, Cincinnati. And they get there in Cincinnati and they just mop the floor with them. They're really going to start off strong, and I think they're going to fall. And Dallas is going to be the first repeat champion we've seen in this division in a long time. And that is just purely based on the strength of schedule and the way their schedule shaped up. I like Dallas's bye week at 7. I think that they have a much, much easier back half of the schedule. I mean, they play in the last 7 games. They play Washington twice. They play the Giants. They play Carolina. They play Tampa Bay. They just have an easier schedule. And there's going to be a tough game, Week 17 against Philly in Philly. There's going to be a tough game in December against Cincinnati at home. But all their rough goes of things are going to be early on. I mean, if you tell me that Dallas is 3-3, 3-4 going into their bye week, and they come out and they lose and they're 3-5 after their bye week, I'm not 100% shocked. But if you tell me that they end up 11-6 after that, I'm still not shocked. You know what I mean? So yeah. I just think that they are deeper than Philly at this point. I think Philly has a higher top end, and if they could stay healthy, they deserve and will win this division. I think there's just too many things that can go wrong in a single football season, and I'm not sure if Philly makes it all the way through that gauntlet of a schedule.
Rick?
So Justin and I are in the same boat, but I didn't really find Justin's take that shocking. No offense to you, Justin. So I'm going to shock you with an even further one. No. Ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia starts off the year, according to my standings, 1-4. And they never recover from that.
Really?
Yep.
1-4? You think they're going to lose 2 games in the NFC South?
I do. Well, the Tampa game, I think they're going to lose because that's a game that will give them ghosts. But I also think that they'll be looking too far ahead of that Tampa game, and I have New Orleans actually beating them in Week 3 in New Orleans because that Saints secondary is pretty tough.
That Saints defense is pretty tough, and I'm not taking anything away from the Saints. That offense can disappear.
It can, but
I think the Eagles' defense is too good for them.
But I think that's a game where you could see a low-scoring game between them because the defense is actually there is just too good. I have the Cowboys at 11-6. I think you're right. I think that their schedule favors them a lot more. The Eagles 8-9. I do not have this team being that.
Not even 9-8.
Wow. Not even 9-8. I do not have this team being the way that everyone says that they're going to be. I don't have it that way.
I have a lot to say about that Saints game, but that's a different story.
I believe that this. I have them winning games towards the end of the year. I have them beating Jacksonville and Jacksonville. I have them losing a close game to Cincinnati and Cincinnati. I have them beating the Rams. But I think that this is the team that is such a long stretch that you are hoping and praying that these fragile guys stay healthy, and there's no basis for that. But I think Dallas wins it going away. I think they can rest the last 2 weeks of the year because I think they'll clinch it by week 16. I think they will because I just think that they're just that better team. And Justin's right. I think that you have a couple holes right now, but who is to say that the Cowboys don't look a scenario at Carolina midseason and say, you guys suck. What do you want from Miles Sanders? And he goes there midseason and becomes a stall. What's to say they don't do that? Because that's a hole that I know, but I'm saying that's a hole that they're missing. And Justin's right. They're really missing a better running attack, but I think that's something they could do. So Dallas is my winner at 11-6. They do repeat, but they're not one of the top 2 seeds. Just right. They're not one of the top 2 seeds.
I feel that. One, Miles Sanders would say that because his injury history has proven that he's probably not going to last that long. And 2, you're telling me it's going to be a low-scoring defensive game 3 weeks into the season assuming a healthy Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, and they're not going to win that running battle against New Orleans, no matter where it is?
I believe that, first of all, I believe that game in the Dome and the turf is going to be a real test for Saquon to make sure that he's fully healthy. But I also believe that Saints defense can really run with these receivers and stop that running game pretty well. I believe it. I mean, I'm looking at, I know they're older, but I believe they have a couple good tricks left in them.
I have no doubt that you're right, that they're going to shut down that passing attack. But again, I don't think New Orleans is going to be able to score. And I don't think that they're going to be able to hold down Philly long enough for them. Like, I could see it being a low-scoring game, and Philly wins that game 14-6, 18-7.
Yeah, but I also feel like that could be a game where
it's a low-scoring game now.
Yeah, that could be a game where you could see a mistake by Jalen Hurts turn into a pick 6. That could stem the tide, turn the tide of that entire game.
We're talking about pick 6s here, and you're going to take Derek Carr over Jalen Hurts.
Also, if you're like, it doesn't matter if the other team throws a pick 6 if your offense is only going to give you like a field goal.
It doesn't.
But what if it's 6-6 and Hurts forces one and it turns into a 14-6 game after that?
You're a lot higher on that Saints defense than I am. That Saints defense is not limiting that.
When we get to the Saints, you'll see that I'm not as high on them as you think I am.
You should see that Saints team. They were nasty last year. The idea that they lost that many games and that offense was so anemic, that was a playoff team defense.
Yeah.
You should really obviously you're going to when we do New Orleans. That was a really good defense last year, and they kept a lot of it together.
Yep.
Yeah. See if they stay healthy. I have it being a lot closer at the top than Rick does. I think it could still be a 1 or 2 game difference, but to me, the ultimate X factor is just a 13 game stretch for Philly. Basically, that's brutal, man. If it was broken up, if Philly had like a week 8 or 9 off week, I would be giving them the NFC East because I think that little break give them a chance to either regain momentum or rest going into continuing it would be a lot better than them having to go now 13 weeks in a row with things. I just, the NFL schedule makers are just fantastic. I say Dallas is unfortunately going to win the division, and I have Philly second, but I have it relatively close. Like, I think it could be a 2-game difference. I think Dallas could go 12-5 again. I don't see the Eagles as an 8 or 9 win team. I think 10 games should still be the benchmark for them in a still fine season, but maybe not living up to expectation season. So, if I had to put a range on it, I say Eagles 10 wins, give or take, and I would say Dallas should be a lock for about 12, which I'm not saying if it will or not, because at the end of all these division breakdowns, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we will give you our full playoff seeding for the 1 through 7 that we have, so our 3 wild cards as well. So stay tuned for that in sometime in August. I have Dallas winning the division. So the 3 of us is a hat trick of the NFC East in terms of not even just our winner, but also our just straight up 1 through 4. Don't think that happened too often last year, so we have the first one now. We will see if that continues. Going into the next division, that was the NFC East. Let's talk about the NFC South. And let's not waste too much time with it. And let's not waste too much time here. Look, the Carolina Panthers. Oh, Justin, our poor Panthers have fallen so far from what we believed a year ago. It's depressing, to say the very least, just in terms of ourselves. But I think it's probably even more depressing if you're a Carolina Panthers fan. Look, they added a handful of things, right? They added some more skill position talent in the wide receiver room with Deontay Johnson and Xavier Legette. They added Jonathan Brooks in the running back room, right? And that defense, there's a handful of people there. It's kind of all I can say. We already talked about it, but the Jadeveon Clowney going home to be the veteran there, to kind of be like a bit of a leader. That's going to be the key there. Like this, and of course, I think the top thing is hoping JC Horn. This is essentially even a further version of what we said about Washington. You just hope your younger players play well and develop, and you hope you get something out of them. Like Adam Thielen is probably going to end up being traded at the deadline. If he is healthy and performing well, you could get something back for him. If Miles Sanders is playing fine, maybe you could get something back for him, get off that contract, convince another team to do it. You could pay off most of the salary for the rest of the year, right? So, there's things you could do there. You could get a little bit of draft picks back, but the key difference will be this offensive line. This offensive line is as big of a mess as it was last season, which you hope not, considering they spent $100 million on one piece of it in Robert Hunt. The offensive line is going to be a difference between the Carolina Panthers once again being the worst team in the league, which they'll actually have a first overall pick this time, or if they're only third, fourth worst. That's the ceiling for them. The ceiling for this team is maybe getting the 4th overall pick in the draft. That's about it. It's just not good for Carolina, man. It's not good. So, Justin, I'll throw it to you before the Podfather returns on cam.
Well, actually, I'm here, but can I show you who's going to be the a better starting quarterback for Carolina than Bryce Young?
Is it your daughter?
Hey.
Say hi, Olivia. Say hi to everybody. Yeah. She had a little bit of a bad nap, but,
making her podcast.
She came down here and said that she's going to be a better quarterback than Bryce Young, which I believe her. So, yeah. All right.
Me too.
Yeah, I did. Justin, go ahead. That's the point.
I think that she's going to be a better quarterback than Bryce Young, but that's saying a lot because I do think Bryce Young takes a step forward this year. I'm not saying he's going to light the world on fire. I'm not saying that he's going to be a top 10 quarterback, top 15 quarterback, but I think he becomes a starter or a starting caliber quarterback in this league. And one, I'm going to give my flowers to the head coach because this is a guy that's come in. I think this was finally the right signing for Carolina. I think this is a guy that is going to come in, and his one goal is going to be to revamp this offense. He's going to be the guy that comes in and says, look, here's what we have to do to put Bryce Young in position to make plays. I think they did well offensively in the free agency and the draft. I love Xavier Legette. I do. He's just an unbelievable physical specimen. He's fast. He's tall. He can go up and get balls. He's only had one real successful year in college, but I do think that he has what it takes to be a top caliber receiver in this league. Adam Thielen is still there. Deontay Johnson was a good move. And that offensive line was uncharacteristically bad last year. Nobody expected them to take the step back that they did. Chuba Hubbard will be a decent running back. They have the tools, I think, that if they game plan better, Bryce Young could take a step forward this year. Now, I'm not going to sit here and guarantee he does. I think that there's obviously issues on the defense that were only made worse by certain losses and moves. I like the addition of Jadeveon Clowney, but I don't necessarily know how that fits in to a team like this. And I do think that they are better than they were last year, but that's a low bar. So
really low bar. So I mean, 3 wins would technically be better than last year. So,
exactly.
As the pod daughter shows better pocket awareness than Bryce Young right now. Rick, what are your
great, man? I mean, I can keep her on the whole show and she'd be perfectly fine. Although it's her lunchtime, she'll get very cranky in a couple of minutes, aren't you? Trying fish sticks today, by the way, for the first time. So that'll be a lot of fun. Yeah, we're having a good time. Quick notes on Carolina. They stink. Get out of here with that. No, but longer notes on them. So what did they add? What did they add at the offseason? Like, aside from a new head coach and a new general manager, and their
who was the assistant general manager, by the way, to the guy they just fired.
Correct. He wasn't even very good. No, he wasn't. Robert Hunt was their big signing, right? $100 million contract for a guard. Great. Good job, guys. Really, really proud of you there. Excellent management of the team here. Look, this is not a very good team. Not a lot of stars on this squad. They traded away Brian Burns. They're hanging on to guys that are probably past their prime. I look at their linebacker core. It's Kalavon Chason, who I think did not get his 5th-year option, right? I think we talked about a while ago. Jadeveon Clowney, who's probably on his last legs of anything, and Shaq Thompson, who had it, lost it, and hasn't gotten it back since. So I believe that this is a Carolina team that's going to stun people in one way, shape, or form. I think they're going to win 1 game this year. 1 game.
So that's interesting because honestly, every single season, we've at least one of us has predicted a team to finish 2 wins or less, and I don't think it's come true yet.
Yeah. Well, so initially I had them going 2-15, winning their first 2 games of the year and losing every game since.
Oh, that's cruel.
I know. But then I looked at week 2 and it was the Chargers, and as I said, yeah, I won't give them the win.
So they'll win 1 week and then lose 16 in a row.
They'll win week 1.
Oh, week 1.
They'll be 1-0, and Dave Tepper will throw a parade in Charlotte, and then they'll lose every game since. I mean, look, I don't believe in this team. I don't, because the pieces aren't there for them to have said we've made significant progress. It's like, Jurg, when you and I were talking about the coaches, I go back to that, and we said the Titans. The Titans were 6-11 last year, and one of the things that I said was, if Rand Carthen says to his ownership, we made great progress this year. We were 6-11 last year, but we made good strides. We have good positive things. And they say, what was your record? 3-14. Nobody's a good 3-14. Carolina's not a good team. They're not. And this is going to be a rough year for them. I think teams are looking at the schedule as a way to say, let's play those guys who are the backups and let's feast. Because this is going to be. I think even Caleb Williams can beat this Carolina defense. So I have Chicago winning that game. That's what I think.
I love the fact that Rick is so high that the Saints could beat the Eagles, but he has them losing week 1 against the Panthers. Yeah. The duality of man, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, again, like I said to Justin, I literally made these today, so Justin has an easier chance of beating me in the pick challenge this year coming up. I'm handing this to you on a silver platter. If you don't win this year, you failed. And you should just put the paper bag back on your head and just wear that for the rest of your life.
He's taunting you more than I am at this point, Justin.
Ooh. To be fair, I taunted you as well, but yeah. Last point about Carolina, you're right. Adam Thielen probably gets traded at the deadline. Rashad Penny probably gets traded at the deadline. Maybe J.C. Horn goes at the deadline. This is a team that's going to be
2 free Shaq Thompson for the love of God.
It's a hard reset for this team. It really is. I know we don't like Panthers, just in general. So yeah.
We don't like the Florida kind either because they ruined my Stanley Cup prediction.
Or the Michigan one from the UFL that no one cares about anymore. So yeah. Just that.
Sounds about right. Yeah. All right. Quick discussion about the Carolina Panthers. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, we are going from bottom to top in the division based off of last season's rankings. And the team that finished 3rd in the NFC South last season, and it's going to be very intriguing to see how they finish this year, will be the Atlanta Falcons. Well, is the Atlanta Falcons. They finished 3rd last year. Look, Similar story to last year. This is a team that there's talent in that skill position group, young talent, that they're now a year older, a year more experienced. From Bijan Robinson and Drake London, you have Kyle Pitts there. They added a couple, depth weapons in the offseason. I think that could be very intriguing for them to play around with, in a Darnell Mooney, in a Rondell Moore, new head coach there in Raheem Morris, because the man who used Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson as, decoys in the offense and not the main weapons in the offense, Arthur Smith, is no longer there. So when the Pittsburgh Steelers' third string running back at 700 yards this season, there's your answer for why, ladies and gentlemen. But they have great young talent there. Offensive line, from Jake Matthews to Caleb McGarry to Chris Lindstrom. That's three strong starters right there who have been there for a while now. There's great chemistry. There's Matthew Bergeron, which I forget if he was a pick from this past draft or the one before it, but a young, solid, guard right there to be next to the veteran Matthews, and then a decent center there in Drew Dahlman, and the defense. There's very mainly veteran based. There's a couple young players in there sprinkled in, but it's like 90% veterans for the most part. There's Grady Jarrett as the interior anchor of that defensive line, with David Onyemata next to him. You have guys in Caden Ellis, Troy Anderson, and Lorenzo Carter there, and a secondary which is solid. There's Jesse Bates III last season, who was good for them. There's AJ Terrell. They're really just looking who is going to be that definitive second guy next to Terrell. Is it a Clark Phillips III, I think, in year 2 or 3 for him? Is it going to be the veteran Mike Hughes, who they have? They have one of the, if not the best kicker in the game. But we know the big addition that was made, Justin. Primetime Kirk Cousins to the quarterback room. They paid a hefty contract for him. And then they drafted a quarterback in the top 10. Atlanta. The duality of man. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Atlanta this season. The Podfather is out once again. So, Justin, I'll throw it to you one more time first. Your thoughts about the Atlanta Falcons and what 2024 has in store for them.
I think that the Atlanta Falcons have the chance to be an offensive powerhouse that we have not seen out of them since the days of Michael Vick.
Even Matt Ryan when he won the MVP?
Yeah, you're right. Maybe like Roddy White, Julio Jones era.
There we go.
Because I think that it is underrated how good that offensive line was last year, even with all the issues that they had. They finally have a legitimate quarterback, and they have weapons. And I mean, they have weapons. I mean, Drake London was kind of on an island last year. They got Darnell Mooney and Rondell Moore, who I think have both been underrated weapons in terrible systems their whole career. I think both of them have a step forward year. I'm not saying that they're going to be top 25 receivers, but top 50 for sure. I think they get, 500-600 yards and maybe, 3 or 4 touchdowns. That's big to get that out of 2 receivers and not have them be your number one guy. Kyle Pitts might have a chance to step forward this year because he's going to have a real quarterback. And, let's not forget, they still have Bijan Robinson and Ty Algier. So they're going to be a stacked offense. They have pieces defensively as well. And now they have a defensive-minded head coach. I really think that we could see a major step forward here from Atlanta. I don't necessarily know if they're going to win a Super Bowl. I don't know if they're going to be a top team in the NFC, but they should be a playoff team, in my mind. At the very least, if they're not making the second or third wild card, there is a much bigger issue foundationally than any of us have predicted so far.
Right.
And considering I'm the only one that's predicted so far, let's hear what you two have to say.
Well, real quick, I will say, just for the context for the people as well, the offensive coordinator, because we mentioned Raheem Morris being the head coach there and being defensive mind, the offensive coordinator is Zach Robinson. So yet another branch from the Sean McVay tree grows because he worked in LA for, I believe, the last 4 or 5 years. So he is the OC there. I kind of gave my thoughts on this team. This team has a lot of similarities to last year's squad. A lot of the players are the same. There's just like a couple things that they're hoping to really patch up there. I think they're hoping for a big year out of Matthew Bergeron right there next to Matthews, and then hoping to have the definitive second corner, I think, next to AJ Terrell, who has proven he's a really good corner in this league. I think the number one thing for them is what are they going to get out of Kirk Cousins? And is he going to prove himself worthy of that contract and stave off the young guy that's behind him trying to take it away? So that being said, Rick, your thoughts on ATL?
It's funny. Like in preparation for all of this, I kind of went back to those older episodes that we did on the draft recap and on the coaching and all of that, and I thought to myself, yeah, the Michael Penix pick was out of left field for them, but when I look at their roster, Justin's right. They've got a very solid offensive line with Lindstrom and Matthews and McGarry and Bergeron. They've got good pieces on defense with Grady Jarrett, pretty much going to run that D line. Their linebacking core, Lorenzo Carter is solid. Braylon Trice, the rookie they picked, seems like a pretty good player. Ibekite is a good linebacker for them. And then their secondary, they didn't address it like I wanted them to, but they've got good pieces that are there too. And yeah, Raheem Morris is a very defensive-minded head coach who can make stars out of a less than stellar defense. I mean, I think if we were to go back and look at Raheem Morris's time when he was the head coach in Tampa, I mean, they didn't make the playoffs, but they had a year where they were 10-6 back in 2010. They were a surprising team in 2010, and that was a squad that had an aging Rondé Barber leading the defensive backfield, had not a lot of guys that you would look at. They had a young Al Woods as their main D tackle, and their linebacking core they had Geno Hayes and Barrett Rube. So they had a lot of injuries, but they still won 10-6 that year because Raheem Morris knows how to make a defense work. So I got to be honest with you. The more I've thought about it, the more I go back to what I originally thought in liking this Atlanta team further. I really do believe this is an Atlanta Falcons team that will challenge for the NFC South crown here with Tampa Bay. Yeah, it does all go to how Kirk Cousins is performing and whether or not he's healthy. But I think in this offense that is not an Arthur Smith offense that will, in fact, use Bijan Robinson and Ty Algier to their full potential, that will figure out how not to get Drake London on that island again. I think that this is a team that can make good moves and can stun some people. I think they can win some games you don't expect, and I think that they'll beat you in different ways. They can. Kirk Cousins can definitely throw the ball a country mile, but they'll also win those 19, 17 defensive battles that are just like won in the trenches. I think that they're a good enough team to do that too. I like this Atlanta team. I really do. I think that, yeah, the specter of Penix is there, but nothing bats that back like winning 10 games or being competitive and getting into the playoffs and making some noise. I think that if Atlanta can do that, then, was it a weird pick for them? Sure. But I think it was maybe pick for the future that they got a little too early on. But it's a good team. They got good weapons, man. I really think this is a good Atlanta Falcons squad.
Yep, same. I think this is going to be a team that a lot of people are going to be high on going into the season. It will not surprise me if they show early on, kind of like Justin said, this is going to be a team that is ready to score on offense. And scoring on offense is going to be a key here because some of these teams in this division can't really do that. Ipso facto, the New Orleans Saints. Look, I was relatively nice, I think, to the Saints last year. I've been relatively nice to Derek Carr. He's just not that good of a quarterback anymore. So this is where I could stop being nice. Chris Olave is a fantastic receiver, I think, to have as your number one guy. But behind him, what is there? There is Rashid Shaheed. What is his ceiling? Maybe is it being a number 3? Okay, but what about your number 2? Oh, maybe is it A.T. Perry? I don't know about that. Equanimeous St. Brown? I think there's been enough time to say he's not going to be the number 2. Cedric Wilson Jr. Probably not. There is no definitive number 2 guy there, and I don't see a receiver on that team that can prove to ever be a number 2 in this league. And I want to be like, I think Rashid Shaheed could be a weapon. I think he could be used, but I'm not. I mean, I will say, offensive coordinator change for the Saints. If you're a Saints fan, thank Christ that it's not old man Carmichael anymore there, because good Lord, the offense died whenever he was calling plays. But still, it's a solid offensive line. It's a decent enough running back room. You started to see a little bit of age with Alvin Kamara last year, but maybe, of him and Jamal Williams, plus Kendre Miller backing the two of them up essentially because it's going to be a two-headed monster. Maybe there's some hope that every once in a while that offense shows you something. It's just the quarterback, man. I'm not a fan of the quarterback. He was throwing balls in the dirt last year and yelling at his receivers. He was missing guys by 5-10 feet, either under or overthrowing them. For a guy that was ran out of town by Josh McDaniels and we were trying to be nice to him, maybe the one time Josh McDaniels saw something happening actually come true, Derek Carr just ain't that guy for you. And they're paying him a lot of money, and it's not looking like a great contract right now. That's just not a fan of the offense. And then defensively, I think this is a defense that is trying to fight off age, and they're hoping that whatever young players they have sprinkled around the lineup can show up. But Marshawn Lattimore has missed games each of the last 2 seasons. I think he's only played exactly 17 games the last 2 years. So he's literally missed half the amount of games he could potentially play the last 2 years. Tyrann Mathieu was healthy last year, but is he going to be healthy this year? Watch them become unlucky, and now Lattimore's healthy, but Mathieu isn't. Paulson Adebo is solid. I'll give him credit. Maybe another year of him being the next guy in the secondary could be something. But it's just that. The linebacking core is Demario Davis, and who else? Kind of it. That's all, for the most part, that's it. And then defensively, Cam Jordan is coming off the worst season since his rookie season. He only had 2 sacks last season, 0 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovered, And next to him is a guy in Brian Bursey, who you hope could take a step in year 2. I think disappointed some people last year in pockets. You hope he could put it together, more consistency. I want to give the kid some credit. I don't want to be too harsh on him for just his rookie year. I think maybe he could put it together and should be one of the starting D tackles for this team by then. And then you're hoping that you can revive Chase Young and get something out of the youngster Isaiah Foskey. I'm not seeing a good defense there. I'm just not. I'm seeing 3 to 4 good players, but it's 11 starters, and 3 or 4 just isn't enough sometimes. I think the Saints are going to take a tumble in this division. Not to last place. We know who that belongs to. But I would be shocked if this team is second in the division again, or even challenging for first. I'm not seeing that out of the Saints this season. I'm just not. So Justin started the last 2. Rick's turn this time.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't believe that the Saints will have enough firepower to compete with Atlanta and with Tampa Bay. I don't think that that's the case, but I think that you're not hitting on a few guys that I think could make a bit of a difference on both sides of the ball. I do not agree with you that they don't have a number 2. I think A.T. Perry last year, in the limited time that he had in his first season, showed that he, can be a number 2 caliber if he gets more time on the field. I mean, this is a guy who only played 10 games and only started 3, but he had 246 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns in those 10 games. If you give him more time and actually give him the chance to start, he could probably be that guy. I was very high on him coming out of Wake Forest. He could be that guy that could be on the other side of the field along with Chris Olave. They drafted Kool-Aid McKinstry to be a part of that defensive secondary. So, yeah, whether you're worried about Marshawn Lattimore or Tyrann Mathieu, Paulson Adebo was very good last year. And, yes, he has his flowers. But an Adebo-McKinstry corner tandem, if you want to throw in Alontae Taylor over there too, because he had – his best year last year, he had 75 tackles and 2 picks. He's not a bad corner. They can probably make that work, but I think the biggest key for them, like you mentioned, this is the first year since 2009 that Pete Carmichael Jr. is not running their offense. If you have a guy that's doing the same thing for 14 years over, it gets stale. So maybe under Clint Kubiak's tutelage, Derek Carr comes back and is a better quarterback than we anticipated. But even so, I mean, this is the funny part. Derek Carr, mid-quarterback, no question about it. He still threw for almost 4,000 yards last year and had his best touchdown-to-interception ratio since 2020. He had 25 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. And I get it. You expect more from a guy who you put all that money in there for, but, he was running in a stagnant offense that is changed now because Kubiak is there. He's got very solid weapons. And this is the team, by the way, that somehow, some way last year almost made the playoffs. They were 9-8 last year. Now, were they a more fluky 9-8 than the Seattle Seahawks were? Absolutely. Were they more fluky of a 9-8 than the Bengals were? Absolutely. But they were still 9-8, so things still worked for them in some capacity. So is it going to be a good year for them? I don't believe so, because they've got a rough time of it, because they've got the AFC West. They've got the NFC East. They've got tough teams on their schedule. But I think they're going to be a little bit better than you might anticipate. And I think that they'll be competitive in some of these games because that defense will hold serve. And yeah, if it shows up that the offense, struggles in week 1 against Carolina, and that's the one game that Carolina wins, it wouldn't surprise me. But if they go the next 16 games 6-10 because their offense gets better after that first game under the new system,
6-10.
Well, if they lose the first game, they'll be 0-1, then 6-10, 6-11.
No, I understand that, but you're trying to say it's a positive if they go 6-10 over the next 16?
It's not a positive, but I'm saying it would have been worse with Carmichael as their offensive coordinator.
True.
Before I realized that Clint Kubiak was their OC, I had them winning 2 games.
But before we pass it off to Justin, I will point out 2 things that you said. Number 1, I actually did like A.T. Perry coming out as well, so I'll apologize to him. Maybe he could do something this year.
Yeah.
The Derek Carr point. Here's why I don't take into account his numbers he put up last year, his touchdown, interception, this, that, and the third. Because it's very easy for a starting quarterback in this league when he gets double-digit plus starts to put up some numbers. You want to know who put up good numbers on paper last year? But if you ask any fan who watched the games, they would say those numbers are complete BS. Russell Wilson was a lot better in year 2 than year 1 for Denver. Every single Broncos fan that watched the games would say that, the numbers were fine on paper, but they don't tell the whole story. He actually wasn't as marketably improved that you might think from year 1 to year 2. So yes, Derek Carr put up, what'd you say, almost 4,000 yards last year or just over? Almost 4,000 yards. He had a good touchdown to interception ratio. It doesn't matter. He's in the pivotal moments when they needed him to the most. He was throwing the football in the ground and yelling at his wide receiver. That's who Spencer Rattler has to learn from.
But I also believe too that that touchdown interception ratio will get better this year because the last 2 seasons, going from his last year in Vegas to his first year in New Orleans, he was dealing with 2 stagnant offensive schemes. Josh McDaniels, who has no clue how to coach his way out of a paper bag, and Pete Carmichael, who should have been taken out behind the barn like Old Yeller and just shot because he was doing that for so long, basically. And guess what? Carmichael's now in Denver as a senior offensive assistant.
Oh, Lord.
Great. But that's why I think, at least it wasn't a year where he threw more interceptions than touchdowns, or he only threw for 1,700 yards. It's consistency. It's not the right consistency, but at least it's showing a plateau that maybe he can get back to where he was when the Raiders were good in that 1 year before he got hurt, So
we're a long way
off from that. I agree with you. But I think that any kind of newfangled energy in an offense can make a quarterback feel a little bit more likely to, get past 4 plays and not tear your Achilles. Because Aaron Rodgers knew what he was doing by not having Nate Hackett coach him for a whole season. He wanted to wait it out until he got his money.
He's going to coach him this year too.
I know, but
anyways,
but instead of $1 million, it's $100 million. So he's all right.
Nathaniel Hackett mention aside, Justin, your thoughts about the Saints as we move forward in this division?
I'm insulted.
I know.
I can't believe
he brought up Hackett, not me.
I can't believe you two would just absolutely slander Rashid Shaheed that way. For a guy that came into the league with 0 expectations, came on a lot in his rookie year. Last year in 15 games, he had over 700 yards and 5 touchdowns, guys. As the number 3 receiver there.
Yep.
All right. If you want to say A.T. Perry is going to be the number 2 guy there, that's fine. But they absolutely have a number 2 caliber receiver on that roster right now. And I am not taking any Rashid Shaheed slander because the issue there is not the receivers. It is the quarterback. Do you know how many 300-yard games he had last year?
2.
5. Do you know how many games under 200 yards he had last year?
5.
6.
I'm close.
The answer is not there at quarterback. The Saints are hilarious to me because they are the exact same model as the Falcons were. They had an excellent roster, a strong defense, position players, youth, decent offensive line play, and their coaching is rough. And they had no quarterback, and they went out and they got a veteran, which is the new model that we're seeing a lot in the NFL. If you do not have the resources to draft a quarterback, a la Buffalo, Kansas City, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, I guess even Dallas, your model is I'm going to build the best team that's possible and hope I get the veteran in free agency. And the Saints, and I guess therefore the Broncos also failed doing that. They had excellent rosters and they did not get the quarterback. And as much as I was a Derek Carr believer for most of his career, last year was a real tough year for me to defend. I mean, there was the one game where they didn't even cross the halfway mark on the field until after the 2-minute warning in the second half. They didn't cross midfield.
For 58 minutes.
Abominable offense. This is not a good offensive team, and their window is closing dramatically. And I don't think that Derek Carr is the answer there. Now, I think Derek Carr's ceiling in this situation is winning a bad division or being a wild card team. I don't really see a lot of playoff wins coming out of that dude. He has not been the same for a number of years. He's not been the same since Gruden left, and before that, he wasn't the same since the ankle injury. And unfortunately, there's a lot of things that career-wise could have gone better for him, and they just straight up didn't. But now he is on a downswing. And I'm not sitting here saying he's going to fall off a cliff, but I don't expect this team to take a step forward because I don't believe in the quarterback play and I don't believe in the coaching. I think they could be an excellent defense like they were last year. I think the offensive line is very good. I think the running game might take a small step back. I don't know how long Kamara has. You know, running backs don't last a long time in this league. But receiver-wise and just in terms of pure talent, this team has something. And it's a shame that that window is closing fast. You know, that defense really is something strong. I love the secondary they have there. I love the offensive line. The linebackers are fantastic. Demario Davis has been unbelievable there. I don't think that they are good enough behind center to make it anywhere important in this league. Now, again, they are fortunate enough to play in a weaker division. They're fortunate enough to play, in my opinion, what is really the weaker conference overall. And if you tell me they win 9 games this year, I'm really shocked, but that is not my prediction for them.
Yeah. Also, Jurg, just so you know, Taysom Hill apparently said in an interview that Clint Kubiak's offense has him lining up as a 3-down fullback as well in other things that he's doing in OTAs. So
is he about to make the Pro Bowl as a fullback now?
We're bringing back the wishbone, baby. Let's go. NCAA football 25. Bring back the flex bone. Let's go.
Oh man, hey, just wait until NCAA 25 is in full effect. There's going to be a lot of people playing that bad boy.
Oh yeah.
Kansas and Kansas State franchises happening all over the field.
Yeah.
But take UConn to the national championship.
Why not?
All right. Last team that we'll be talking about today, the NFC South champions from the 2023 season, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This was the team that the expectation last year was not a lot good because Tom Brady left, a lot of pieces left. There were still some guys there, but ultimately it wasn't looking great. Todd Bowles, a lot of question of him as the head coach. Spoiler alert, there's still questions about him. It was interesting. But who knew that a modern renaissance would be able to lead that team back to the postseason, winning that division yet again, because Baker Mayfield resurrected a career alongside the help of Dave Canales, who is now the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, resurrected his career and kept his career alive for a couple seasons to the tune of a very rich contract for himself this past summer. So Baker is going to be once again taking the hold of things taking the reins behind center and leading this team. Should be interesting. Running back room isn't necessarily impressive on paper. You hope Rachaad White can, build off of a rookie season and maybe get a little bit more consistency in his style. Bucky Irving as his backup running back. First off, phenomenal name. Second off, we'll see what happens there. And some veterans there. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, that is the strength of this team in terms of the wide receiving core. It's those two top guys. They added Sterling Shepard there, who was a bit injury prone, but maybe as the third or even fourth guy in this receiving core could contribute a game or two. And you have an offensive line that you got to give credit to, relatively strong, with Tristan Wirfs as the left tackle and a guy that we liked, I think 2 years ago for our mock draft, Cody Mock. So there's some guys there. And then defensively, Vita Vea, Kalijah Cansey, the veteran Levante David is still there. I completely forgot before we had to preview this division that he was still there. I thought he had actually just stepped away. And then a defensive secondary where, yes, they did actually trade Carlton Davis in the offseason. They're hoping that some young guys can take the lead there, but you have a Jamal Dean, Zion McCullum, and you bring back Jordan Whitehead there alongside your Pro Bowl, All-Pro caliber free safety in Antoine Winfield Jr. But to me, the ultimate question is, was last year just lightning in a bottle, or can they repeat that performance? I don't know. And part of the reason I think so, I'm having questions about that is because I think it's fair to ask questions when the offensive coordinator of a successful season leaves. Are you going to be able to repeat it? Is the Baker Mayfield experience going to do well? Are they going to continue to play to his strengths? Or are they going to deviate away, which they've done in the past? But not they. Other teams have done in the past, by the way, Cleveland. And questions of Todd Bowles as a coach. I think all three of us had questions about that last year, and I think we would all agree that some questionable coaching maneuvers and decisions cost them in the playoff game at the end, right? With the timeout situation, with other things, like there's a lot to wonder, right, about Tampa. And you guys have both said it, relatively weak division, should in theory still play to their strengths. It's still difficult to say. So I think they'll still be a fine team. I think they'll be competing, like Justin kind of mentioned, like maybe is there a chance that one of these other NFC South teams could compete for the second wild card spot, if not the division crown? Once again, we'll see in a month and a half time when we give our full playoff breakdowns. But, if there is a team in this division that if they don't win it, could sneak in as wild card too, this is probably one of the teams you would lean towards because of last year. But we obviously have to see how it plays out. Rick, your thoughts about Tampa going into 2024?
All right, so I did a little bit of research on their new offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, who came to them after being the OC at Kentucky last year in the college ranks. And I looked at what the offensive efficiency numbers were last year for the Wildcats. They were markedly better in every category with Cohen than with the previous OC. I know it's college, but it's the SEC. And if you want to comp the NFC South to the SEC, I wouldn't blame you because they're pretty much the same thing. Let's be honest here. The one thing that I will say about Liam Cohen's offensive efficiency that I noticed from years past is that in 2022, Kentucky's offense ran about 65, 66 plays per game. Last year, Kentucky's offense ran 55 plays per game. Now, whether that's because there were a lot of 3-and-outs or because Cohen didn't have a bad time management skill, is what it is. But that's who you've got coming in here. Now, do college offensive coordinators really normally do well in this game? I don't know, but that might be your one area of concern if you're Baker Mayfield, because as we said, this renaissance season that he had where, correct me if I'm wrong, he should have won comeback player of the year, but I don't think he did, right? It was Flacco who won, I believe, right?
Yeah, which is so ridiculous.
Awful. The worst thing ever. So I look at this team and I look at, all of their players and I think to myself, where could they stumble? They have this potential, but where are the games on their schedule where they could have issues? And I got to be honest with you. I mean, they're playing tougher opponents, like out of the conference. Well, I mean, look, yes, the NFC East, we know about them, the AFC West, but because they were in first place last year, they have those random games against, the top of their divisions, which is Detroit and San Francisco and Baltimore. So that's going to be where your real test comes in. Do you think that you can win any of those games, or at least be competitive in those games to really make a big key there? And Justin, again, something that we brought up in one of our episodes without you that I don't know if you went back and saw it, but did you know that Mike Evans doesn't have a 100-catch season in his entire career? 1,000 yards every year, but not 100 catches every season. That record for the Bucs is still held by Keyshawn freaking Johnson. So I think this is the year for Evans that he will crack that. But Ryan Jensen was a big cog for them in the years past, and he was hurt last year and he retired. They needed to fill the hole. They drafted Graham Barton, who I think will slide in and be day one center, no question in my mind. They did what they needed to do there in the draft. Yes, Bucky Irving they picked in the 4th round. Jalen McMillan is a stud who could be a speedster, who could – if you pair Jalen McMillan with Chris Godwin in the slots, it's going to be a nightmare for undercuts for defenses here. My main concern is Baker. When was the last time Baker put together 2 really good seasons as a pro quarterback?
I don't think he's done it yet.
Well, I mean, if you look away from the wins, his first 2 years, he threw for just a shade under 3,850 yards in both. And then from there, it fell off. So he threw 4,000 last year. He was really good when it mattered the most. He was a renaissance player. He was resurgent. But is that a harbinger that this year is going to be a problem? Do teams now know who he is, and can teams better scheme for him? Was the offense under Canales the reason why he was so good? And now that he's gone, will Mayfield falter under Liam Cohen? I'm in the same boat as you guys, where I think this is a good team that has the potential to compete for the division again, and if not, get enough wins and enough competent football to be a wild card team. But is that enough? Is that really enough for what we're looking for here, or is that a step backwards? I hate to say it like this, but did Todd Bowles buy himself another year? And if they don't win the division again, but they're still in the playoffs, is that enough again to buy him another year? I don't know. They're an enigma of this team, but I think they can be really good if everything falls their way again. And I think they have enough pieces to make that run.
I will just say, coaches of a similar caliber to Bowles have been fired for less. So if he can get them back-to-back playoff appearances, well, actually 3 in a row, if realistically, because they made it his first year as well.
Right. Yeah.
So we'll see. Justin, you'll close us out on thoughts on Tampa before we get to our NFC South predictions.
Yeah. So I think Tampa should compete. I think they were very good last year. They were surprising. This is my Seattle of the first pick challenge, where I was like, they're going to be terrible. And they weren't. They improved their secondary, I think, in this offseason as well. They're very well coached defensively. They have a decent offensive line. Their running game has been good to supplement what they already have, and they're stacked at receiver. Mike Evans is still a stud. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. It is what it is. The question mark in my mind is, can they supplement the coaching that helped put Baker Mayfield in the position to continuously win games? Because it's not about, in my mind, figuring out Baker Mayfield. We know who Baker Mayfield is. We've seen it for a number of years. We knew who he was in Cleveland. He's not different here in Tampa Bay. What's good about Baker Mayfield is, kid's a winner. He does what it takes to win. He just has that intangible, as much as I hate to say it, Tim Tebow kind of thing, where like the dude just wins games that he shouldn't. Tim Tebow had no business being a professional NFL quarterback, but he's got a playoff win under his belt.
Sure.
You know what I mean? The kid is a winner. And he's not going to do anything that's going to surprise you. They're going to win dirty, smash mouth, hard-nosed football. He's going to make plays for his team, but he's not going to do anything that's completely outside of the realm of possibility. He's not going to be a Patrick Mahomes or a Joe Burrow or a Justin Herbert type player. They're going to run standard offense. He's going to find open players, and their receivers are great at getting open. The question is, can they keep him in the right position and keep him reined in to the point where he's not going the other way with it? He's not overthrowing guys and throwing interceptions. He's not costing his team games. I think that they have a chance to be, if not the division winner, a wild card team in the NFC. But they have a real competitor for the first time, and that is going to be Atlanta. And New Orleans is not an easy out either. As much as I destroyed them offensively, that defense is nasty, and they're still going to have to outscore that team, which is not a high number, but it's going to be difficult against a defense like that. So they should compete. In my mind, they are no longer the favorite to win that division, but I don't think that the odds are so far against them that they shouldn't be able to beat Atlanta.
Well, that being said, let's roll right into it. Our predictions. Justin, you'll start us off first. We go 4-3 and then 1-2. So Justin, your 4th seed in the NFC South is?
So I'm going to surprise no one by picking the Carolina Panthers. Like I said, I do think they take a step forward this year, but I don't think it's a big step. And I don't think that, baby steps are a step forward, right?
Sort of, yeah.
It should be a little bit better than last year. I don't think they're going to win one game like Rick said, but they should do better.
Yeah. Panthers 4th seed. Maybe they get 3 wins if they're lucky.
I think they'll maybe 4 or 5.
We'll see. Rick. Well, we know Rick has them as 1-16. So.
Yeah, and other spoiler: Ejiro Evero becomes the interim head coach by week 15 because Dave Tepper doesn't know how to run a franchise, so he's going to fire Canales, even though it's not his fault.
I could see that happening.
Yep.
All right. We'll just keep it with Rick, 3rd seed.
I batted between 7-10 and 6-11, but I'm sticking at 6-11 with New Orleans. Look, as I said, like, this is a better team, but Atlanta and Tampa are just, I think, 4 or 5 steps ahead of them. And yeah, why? Because, the one thing that we're not saying with New Orleans, and we're not mentioning him, and I think for good reason, and Jurg going to admit that I mentioned him now.
He's going to get fired by the end of the year.
But it's for a good reason. Dennis Allen will get fired too.
Yeah.
He will. I think Dennis Allen is going to cost this team games.
Yeah.
That's why I have him 6-11, because I think that he's going to make some Brandon Staley-esque decisions that will cost this team from being 8-9. I think they'll lose games like in the very late season because Dennis Allen will mismanage this so badly. I think Carr will have a better year, and I think the defense will be really good, but I think they will lose games because their coaching gets in the way. Yeah. So that's what it is. I think 6-11 for New Orleans, and Allen gets fired too.
If the Carolina Panthers were not such a sad sack organization, you could try to say the Saints would finish last, but the Carolina Panthers are literally one of the worst teams of all time. So that's why. It's literally, Saints are my 3rd. Look, I'm not high on the quarterback. I think that defense, while good, can take a step back because they're older. Not everyone ages like fine wine. I would know. I'm getting worse with age myself. It just happens. So the Saints are my 3rd seed. Justin?
The Saints are my 3rd seed as well. I think we saw basically what you're going to get out of Derek Carr last year. I think you'll see the same thing this year. I do think the defense is going to be nasty, but I do think that Rick is right around 6-11. Seems like the correct number for them at this time.
All right. I will give my winner first. My winner for 2024 for the NFC South is the Atlanta Falcons. Look, this is a team that, you just said that the Dennis Allen cost the Falcons, right, Rick?
Yep.
Dennis Allen's going to cost the Saints. Arthur Smith cost the Falcons last year. I think they could have been a lot better if it wasn't for him. I think you now have a more mature, experienced veteran head coach right there. These guys are another year older. They've been through some bad coaching. And sometimes when you get out of a bad environment or get out from under a bad boss, it just breathes new life into you. And I think that's what some of these guys on the Falcons are going to do. Yeah, I think I can't believe I'm complimenting him. You have a motivated Kirk Cousins. I think he's very motivated after being cut loose by Minnesota. And I think he's going to do all he can to do great in Atlanta and really be big for them. So I have the Falcons as my 1st seed in the division, so I have them winning the NFC South. I have the Buccaneers as my 2nd seed in the division. Will they make the wild card? You have to wait a couple weeks, like 6 or 7 weeks, give or take.
Am I up?
Yeah.
I agree with you, Jurg. For the first time in 3 years, I have not fired an NFC coach during our preseason picks, but Rick has taken that mantle for me.
Well, we have 2 more divisions left, so hold on. So
we do. Well, but both years it's been an A.
It's in the South both years, yeah. So
fair enough.
But, I mean, I think you guys. I think we're pretty in lockstep here. I could see Dennis Allen getting fired if they're 6-11 this year. I could see Tampa Bay challenging, but really, I think that the Falcons are the better team. They are the only team in this league, in this conference, that I think has a bona fide starter at quarterback. Not to say anything bad against Baker Mayfield, because I think he's proven that he's a starter in this league, but he's not at the same level as Kirk Cousins, and he has not proven to be. Now, there is a chance we don't see the Kirk Cousins of old. He is coming off major Achilles surgery at a later age in his career, but there's no reason for me to think that he's going to take a step back at this point, and this should be Atlanta's division to lose.
Yeah. I have the Falcons going 10-7 this year and winning the division. I think this is a much better team with Kirk Cousins there. But I also have Tampa Bay going 10-7. So I have it being a tiebreaker. I think the Bucs can still hold serve. I think they're still capable of being a competitive team. And I also believe that they're competent enough to be able to go to the playoffs as well. I think this is a year where the NFC South, I think, proved last year with Tampa Bay that they're not necessarily the laughingstock that we thought they were.
Mhm.
But, once you get past the top two teams, it falls off a cliff a little bit. But I think Atlanta wins the tiebreaker based on division. I think they go 5-1 in the division. I think Tampa goes 4-2. But I think Atlanta wins the division 10-7, but Tampa Bay is also 10-7 as well.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up a monster episode. 2 divisions previewed this week, 2 broken down, and 2 pure hat tricks for us between these 2 divisions. The NFC East, we all predicted Commanders 4th, Giants 3rd, Eagles 2nd, Cowboys 1st. And for the NFC South, we all predicted Panthers 4th, Saints 3rd, Buccaneers 2nd, Falcons 1st. So we have that.
We're so in lockstep for 2 divisions.
I have a feeling it's going to change
Definitely.
with the next 2 because you have a little bit of there's some team positions there where you could change it up a little bit too,
Yeah,
at least. Because I know Rick has the Cardinals winning the NFC West, actually. So, anyways, that being said, it's been a while. It's time to end things off the way we've been used to. Rick, the floor is completely yours. Sing us all out. Well, not literally singing.
I'd like to hear you sing if you wanted. I know there's a showman in there.
A rant and Rick's roast from podium. Take us
there is a showman in here, but I don't want to. I'm going to quote a line from an old Western TV show that my dad and I used to watch when I was a kid. If he sings any higher, those dogs will tear him apart. So I'm going to pass on singing right now. However, I will. I've done some thinking, and I've done some ruminating, and I've done some list making. And so in my head, I'm trying to think of what's relevant now that I can say for this rant podium here. So number 3, I'm sorry, Jurg, the ESPYs are a joke. They're an absolute joke and an example of buffoonery in the way that you vote for it, because how in the world is Coco Gauff the best overall tennis player over someone who's been number 1 in the women's game for the entire year? And for a guy that I can't stand in Djokovic, but he's still a good tennis player, how is she the number 1 tennis player that gets the ESPY for best tennis player? Because what is the voting? What is the criteria? None of this makes sense. It doesn't. And I'm going to level with you. Prince Harry doesn't deserve the Pat Tillman Award. He doesn't. I'm sorry. What? I mean, the Invictus Games are great, but what have you done recently? You married a harlot and Meghan Markle. What are you doing else? Sorry. Just telling it out there. Number 2. There was a wedding this past weekend. I'm sure you guys were aware of it, but if not, that's perfectly fine. Nobody else really was either, but I was. Because this was a wedding that had a 7-month pre-party that then went into the ceremony, to the 3-day ceremony this year. It was in India. It was the son of a billionaire Indian tech guru who, to put a finer point on it, looks like a guy who would rather be doing Fortnite than getting married at this very moment, because he's not an attractive human being. This is a wedding that cost $600 million because they flew to Monaco. They had Bieber come in for a concert. They had Bollywood royalty performing for a $600 million wedding that will end in divorce in 15 months. Calling it now. And in a time and place when inflation is getting so out of hand across the world, you'd rather spend $600 million on a 3-day bash. Well, you cannot recoup that money. It doesn't jive. It doesn't make any sense to me. So why are we doing this? Why does this make any sense? I'll tell you why it doesn't. And number 1 on my list. Now, I'm going to get political, but not for the reasons you expect. I'm going to echo sentiments that have been said time and time again going into November of this year. This is the best we've got. This is the best we've got in this country. The land of opportunity. Give me your tired, your poor, and your senior citizens huddling to be president. This is the best we've got in this country. Like, say what you will about both guys. And throw in Kennedy if you want to as well. Fine. They're all over 70. We have to, and I'm sorry to do this, we have to now make an amendment to the amendment. Yes, you can run for president of the United States after 35, but you can't run after 70. You can't. Like, it's bad enough that one gentleman can't remember where he put his keys. The other one can't remember where he put anything else. Like, and would lie to you and tell you that he put him somewhere else where he didn't. Like, why is this a choice of two linear options that nobody wants? And a third if you're including Kennedy. Why? Like, and I hate the youth of today. I hate you because your language and your terminology, nobody gives a crap what skibidi toilet Ohio Riz is. Nobody gives a crap. But they got a point in that, like, they're looking at this and they're saying, why would I vote in this? Why is this important? Look, we need to do better as a country and as a society. And I'm 32, so I'm 4 years away from being eligible. But I will run in 2028.
Yes.
Because, like, I stand for freedom. But, like, again, like, why are these two, and three if you want to include Kennedy, why are they the options? Why are they the choices? When did we become so reliant on pulling Grandpappy off the porch to run for the highest office in the land? Like they should both just go to the villages and just play golf and just retire and live out the rest of their days. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me that we live in a country that, the country says they're the best, and Will McAvoy said it's not the greatest country in the world. I'm not going to go that far crazy. But, like, this is the best we got. I'm sorry. Like, it's not. And it's demoralizing. No wonder Santa Monica County had a public health emergency for loneliness way back when with the Super Bowl. Because, makes sense. And no wonder those 5 people drove into a geyser in Yellowstone. Yeah. Seeing the selection, I would too. Sorry, I would. But yeah, it's just a problem. And God forgive me if I do run in 2028, I am not putting Adam Rank as my vice president because he's a joke. And Lincoln Riley's still a bum. So there we go. That's all there is to it. Etc. from there.
Yeah. And Duncan still sucks, right, Rick?
Oh my God, they're the worst. They're the worst. Tim Hortons came out with a strawberry cheesecake muffin that is phenomenal. Just proves for the point. Tim Hortons better than Duncan. Duncan worse than everything.
Wonder if that treat made it all the way to Spain.
Duncan is worse than this hand vacuum that I have here for no reason. Worse than this.
I love that you have that right next to your.
Sorry, I had to vacuum up the particles from a sprinkled donut.
If this was a basketball podcast, Rick would just use that vacuum every time he predicts a sweep.
I mean, better than a broom, man.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that being said, thank you so much for the return episode here of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Over 2.5 hours, 2 divisions down, 6 more to go as we truly begin the trek to the 2024 NFL season. As Rick's other child now joins us on cam, Sienna, as beautiful as she is. Guys, we'll be back next weekend. Don't you worry. Or at some point in the weekday as well.
Or worry. You can worry too. That's fine.
Episode can come out at any time whatsoever, but we will be going over the next 6 divisions. We're going to finish the NFC before we then move on to the AFC, before we give our full playoff picture. And then 2024 NFL is upon us. That means the return of the Pick Challenge. I'm excited for that. I'm excited for leading up to it. I'm excited for the end of the year of NFL for football and beyond as we continue this trek. And please continue to join us on the road to that. We're at 112 now. Next thing we know, we're at episode 200, boys, and we won't stop from there, we think. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Fun Football and Chaos. We will see you guys next time. Thank you, and goodbye.